everyone. We are having a very special episode today on The Lucid Truth, which is getting rebooted for its 8th episode. It's going to be with Barry Cooper. If any of you guys don't know who Barry Cooper is, I will let this video kind of describe for itself.
A one-time Texas drug agent is now showing drug dealers and users how to conceal their stash to avoid getting busted. Al Gore III, pay attention. He was arrested over the weekend, or rather over the holiday.
To hide your stash in hard-to-find places, such as way under the dash. There's all kinds of crevices and places to hide small amounts of marijuana.
Okay, great advice. So is he crossing the line? To show you how to break the law, joining us right now is the creator of the DVD, Never Get Busted Again, Barry Cooper. Good morning to you, Barry.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
On the other side, a former DEA agent, currently with the Investigative Management Group, Ann Hayes. Good morning to you as well, Ann.
Good morning, Steve.
Barry, where'd you get this idea to show people where to hide their illegal drugs?
Well, it became clear to me that learning 750,000 people go to jail every year for simple possession, with 400,000 of those being kids 25 years old and under, which hurts their chances of being educated because they can't get the student loans. It's unreasonable to search and arrest somebody for something as harmless as marijuana.
Well, Barry, you're talking about simple possession of something that is against the law.
Well, it shouldn't be against the law.
Well,
that
it is.
Law was. It is against the law. It was made against the law in 1937 when Harry Anslinger testified before the Senate that marijuana needed to be made illegal because of its effects on the degenerate races. And I'll quote him when he said before the Senate that marijuana causes white women to seek relations with Negroes, and marijuana has been illegal ever since, and the debate is over. It's much safer than alcohol, and the harm we're causing on American citizens by placing them in prison and jail where they can be murdered, stabbed, or raped for such a harmless plant is a greater harm we're causing than if we would have just allowed them to smoke the pot.
All right, and he says just let them smoke the pot.
Well, he's very far off base. I mean, as a former DEA agent on so many levels, I'm disgusted by what he's doing. But the main
I'm disgusted by the DEA's attempts to block my testimony in court regarding Drug Dog's false alerting by you guys releasing a 2002 highly sensitive and confidential report. You faxed it, and it ultimately wound up in the hands of a civilian, which jeopardized the lives of other civilians.
Let you talk for a minute. Let me talk.
Barry, hold on. Barry, let Ann respond.
My concern is that we are minimizing the problems of marijuana. Marijuana is not a safe drug. Steve, I work with people every day, especially with kids. If you want to be stupid, smoke pot, because that's what it does to you.
Have you lost your mind? Marijuana, you're making statements that science has already proven.
Barry, you have no credibility. You're a former law enforcement agent that is now teaching people how to break the law.
Your approval rating in the United States, the DEA's approval rating, is horrible. You have no credibility.
Well, I'm a former DEA agent, but
I don't think Ann Hayes has an approval rating. Barry, hang on just a second. When you see his DVD, where he shows young people or old people how to hide stuff under the dash, what does that make you think?
It's insignificant, the amount of impact he's having on law enforcement. I'm not concerned about that. What concerns me is two things. One is that he's sending the message that marijuana is a safe drug. It is not a safe drug. There is not an exception in the world with a kid who has drug problems that did not start with marijuana because they assume that it's a safe drug. It also sends the message to parents that parents are looking for an excuse not to confront their kids about drugs.
Sure.
It is very dangerous.
All right.
The third thing.
Hang on just a second. Barry and Ann, hang on. We want to continue this on the other side of a brief timeout, all right? More with Barry and Ann. Email us how you feel about this at friends@foxnews.com. Is it okay to show kids where to hide their stash? All right, we're back with one-time Texas law enforcement agent who is now showing drug users how to conceal their stash of pot or whatever. Join us right now. Top of the screen is the DVD creator Never Get Busted Again, Barry Cooper. On the other side, a DEA agent currently with the investigative management group, Ann Hayes. And one of your problems I know you've got with Barry is the fact that when people see that he is a former law enforcement person, they go, look at that, and he's showing us how to do it.
Right. He must know what he's talking about. And that's the problem that it sends. It sends out a message, one, that pot is okay, and it's not. Marijuana is very different than it was many years ago. The THC levels, tetrahydrocannabinol.
Not one person has ever died from an overdose of marijuana.
Have they ever died from getting in the car with the wrong person after they're high? If they're so high, they're speeding at 100 miles an hour down the highway. Yes, they do die. People
that was from prescription medication,
well, maybe he was smoking pot and used bad judgment and took pills. I mean, that's what happens. People smoke pot and then they use bad judgment. They drink, they pass out, they throw up, and then they choke.
The statistics,
that happens to kids all the time.
According to FARS, the Fatal Accident Reporting System, only 17 people died in 2006 because of marijuana in an automobile, compared to 111,000 deaths of alcohol. Alcohol and tobacco kills hundreds of thousands of people every year.
I don't disagree with that.
Not one single death has been contributed to marijuana overdose, and only 17 have been.
Well, you're talking about overdosing. Overdosing is a little bit different. Right. Smoking yourself to death with pot would be difficult.
Well, I just gave you.
Hey, Barry.
Barry, let me ask you. Not difficult.
Barry, let me ask you this. Barry, how much pot do you smoke? Do you smoke pot?
I smoke pot, but I don't inhale.
Very funny. You know, do you smoke pot? You're talking all about pot smoking.
I just answered your question.
So you smoke a lot of pot? You don't inhale?
I just said I smoke pot, but I don't inhale.
When you look at the DVD that he's selling and making a profit on, is he really giving anybody any big secrets?
No.
Hide it under the dash.
No,
absolutely, they are. That's why over 10,000 Americans have bought it.
Barry, let her answer.
It's my
opinion. You're letting her spew garbage.
Do me a favor, don't inhale for a moment. Go ahead, Ann.
It's my opinion that he's not giving out any tremendous secrets about where to hide your marijuana. That's not the issue here. The issue here is that he's a former police officer. He was not an agent. He was a police officer, and he's teaching people how to break the law. That's a problem because people look at that and they lose credibility. Law enforcement has credibility problems when people do that.
All right,
so that's an issue.
We're going to let people have the last word and judge on their own. Ann Hayes and Barry Cooper, we thank you very much for joining us live today.
Nevergetbusted.com.
All right, very good. Don't inhale.barry. All right.
Great to have you, man. How's it going? Where are you at right now? You're in the Philippines.
I'm in Bohol, Philippines, man, on a paradise island. Actually, the first year in about 15 years that's been peaceful without any traumas or tragedies. So I'm enjoying life right now. I'm in a good place.
That's awesome. You really deserve it based off of, some of the things that you've done for the community of freedom and liberty. So that's cool. It's nice where you are. It's about to snow here, so it's getting, not quite yet, but I'm getting a little scared, so it's getting there. I'm guessing it's not a snow thing there?
No, I haven't had a winter in almost 9 years. I fled the U.S. I self-exiled 9 years ago, and I went to Venezuela, then Brazil, then Mexico, now the Philippines, and none of those places have a winter season, so I forgot what cold feels like.
You're lucky. You're lucky. I was born in Texas, so I'm resilient to the, I'm not very resilient to cold, really. Which you used to work in Texas, I believe. I'm from Denton.
Part of Texas? Denton, oh yeah, the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I grew up 100 miles east of there.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, my mom moved to Ohio quick, and that was cool. So, Barry, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, you're welcome. But let me tell you just that the no winter thing kind of triggered a memory in me. When I left the U.S., I told myself that I would rather be broke and homeless on a beach somewhere, living in a tent, than live one more day under the retaliation that I was receiving from law enforcement And I literally moved out of the country with not much. and I've lived on a beach ever since. Fortunately, I'm not homeless.
Well, that's good. That's a tempting offer, honestly. I mean, I can barely stand the US anymore. If I were to go anywhere, it would be Brazil, which, interestingly, you've been there before. So can you give our audience who might not know who you are, at the start of this video, I shared like a little clip from Fox and Friends when you were on there, because I just thought it was so epic and awesome. But can you give us a little rundown of your background, who you used to be, and who you are now?
Well, I was made famous 12, 13 years ago when I released a DVD titled Traffic Stops Never Get Busted. And apparently the DVD was needed. I didn't know how much it was needed, but it teaches people how to not get busted for specifically cannabis. And this was back when cannabis wasn't legal. So the reason people paid attention to the video, because my bosses told the Associated Press that in their thoughts, I was one of the top narcotics officers in the nation at the time.
Wow.
And I made a lot of arrests for 8 years. I'm very apologetic for that. I realized the drug war was bullshit. And without going through all the arguments of why the drug war is bullshit, your audience knows it. But I realized that. So I switched sides and made that video and released it. And not long after that, I started busting crooked cops by setting up stings such as a fake grow room in Odessa, Texas. And I set up these stings not just to catch cops on camera doing illegal raids, but to free a lady named Yolanda Madden from a federal prison where she had been wrongfully imprisoned. They had planted methamphetamine on her. And because of that sting that I did in Odessa, luring the cops into, I called it cop busters, spelt with a K. Because of that sting and catching the cops in that illegal raid, a federal judge released Yolanda from prison. She had 4 years left to serve, and she had already served 4 years. So that was a big moment for us. After releasing the video and then stinging cops online, I was naive enough to believe that during these cop stings and such, if I were not breaking the law, which I wasn't, the government couldn't touch me. So I announced my bid for Attorney General in Texas. You got to understand, when cop busters hit, when I was out busting those cops, we shut down servers. My site would get millions of hits in moments, and we shut down servers. So it was big news. This was before cop busting was a sport. Now I think they call it cop blocking. When I was doing it, I called it cop busters, and it wasn't popular then. Nobody had ever done that ever in the history of the U.S. Nobody had set up cops like I did on those stings. So I announced my candidacy for Texas Attorney General, and my plan was to go around Texas busting cops. I had a television show in Hollywood that was going to air it, and I was going to use that fame and money to win the election. And had I won Texas Attorney General, my plan was to end the drug war in Texas, because the Texas Attorney General, he's the highest law enforcement in Texas. He's in charge of the chiefs and the sheriffs. So he's the boss of all the cops. And I was going to make it illegal for the police to make drug arrests. And I was going to do that through a civil suit. I couldn't make possession of marijuana legal or possession of cocaine legal, but I could encourage whoever was arrested, as Attorney General, whoever was arrested for any of those substances, I was going to encourage them to file a lawsuit. And me, as the Attorney General, I could approve the lawsuit. And 5, 6 of those lawsuits, and everybody would, all the police departments were going to get the message that, hey, if you arrest somebody for drugs, you're going to get sued, we're going to get sued, and we're going to lose. So I was effectively going to end the drug war in Texas, and I was going to use that as an example for the other 49 states. Now, that's my naivety. Man, looking back, I didn't realize how aggressively government protects their interests. And there's no fucking way they were going to let me become Attorney General. So they began raiding me and arresting me. They took my autistic son, and it was one arrest over and over and over and over. It just didn't quit. So I got the message loud and clear. I took a step back, and I thought, wait a minute, you know, apparently I've done some good activism work here because it's getting the attention of everybody. And I started looking at past activists that got attention, and their retirement program was either assassination or prison.
Yeah.
I mean, there's really not any known famous activists that are still alive.
Yeah, they don't like that. It's a threat to their security.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, there was a breach. It wasn't by Anonymous. It was by another group similar to Anonymous. They hacked the police department's computers in Arizona, and they released online an FBI report about me. And it's the FBI. It's a sensitive FBI report. It was FBI, if you read it, was giving permission to local law enforcement to all gang up on me, and they did. And it worked. So when they began retaliating, I couldn't take anymore. My family, it was just ripping us apart. They would arrest me, put me in jail, take a day or two to get out. I would get out, think it was over, and they would come back and get me for another charge. Yeah. And
just because you were running for Attorney General.
Yeah. Well, Isaac, I'd been saying, I said, the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution in the United States is obviously not being recognized by the government. There's tens of thousands of illegal arrests and seizures daily. So I was willing to live in the U.S. with that, but I always said that if they ever put me in jail for speech or for free press, the First Amendment, then I'm leaving the U.S. And that's what they put me in jail for. They actually raided my house on a misdemeanor false report to a peace officer. They say I gave a false report to a peace officer to lure them into that house, that fake marijuana grow room, but I didn't. And so the listed on the search warrant for my house was all my videos, my journals, my computers, my cameras, my photographs, my films. That's all protected by First Amendment. It should be, but
it's your journalist stuff.
Yeah, and so I'm like, hey, I'm gonna get the fuck out of here. And at the time, they had my autistic son, and we fought through appeals and did everything we could to get him back, and we finally got him back. I told my wife at the time, she's dead now, but I told her, rest in peace, Candy Cooper. I told her at the time, as soon as we get our son back and I get these cases resolved, we're getting the fuck out of here. And we did. And I haven't been back to the U.S. in 9 years.
Wow, that's insane. So you left the U.S. after all this happened with the Attorney General. Where did you go from there?
Well, I fled to Venezuela because there's no extradition. And at the time, we were breaking a federal law called parental kidnapping. Our son has another father, and that father got weekend visitations, and we left without his permission and without my son having a passport. So if he filed parental kidnapping on us, the Marshal Service would have surrounded me wherever I was, extradited the mom and I back to the U.S., put us in prison for 5 to 8 years, and we'd have never got to see our son again. Now, the reason I fled without the father's permission is because it's my belief the father had been molesting my son.
So you were protecting him.
That absolutely. And my son's autistic. Now, the real father is also the one who joined forces with the police to take our son. And God, he put us through, you couldn't imagine the pain he put us through. So I chose to flee to Venezuela. There was no extradition. And the way we got there without my son having a passport is I did my research, and I learned that a cruise ship leaving the U.S., I don't know if it's still like this, but it was then. A cruise ship leaving the U.S., as long as it returns back to the U.S. at its final destination, you don't have to have a passport, just a birth certificate. So we got on a cruise. We got on a cruise ship that went to Aruba, and the entire ship got to disembark in Aruba for 5 or 6 hours, to look around. We disembarked and never got back on that ship. I had a friend in Venezuela who was in Austin, Texas, who was very connected to the Venezuelans. He was a Venezuelan. Boat to take my family and I 8 miles across the ocean from Aruba to Venezuela. When I landed in Venezuela, we paid the customs there to let my family in without Zach having a passport. And the way we paid for that, because I had went through court, remember they'd arrested me 3 times, my wife once, raided us once. So my legal bill was over $50,000. And thank God for James Gill, attorney James Gill in Austin, Texas. He's one of the prominent lawyers in the U.S. now. He was my lawyer that helped wiggle me out of all of that. But to pay him and to have enough money to get to Venezuela, 2 months before we left, I started selling weed. I was selling.
There you go.
I was selling. I would buy a 5-pack at a time, 5 pounds at a time, and I'd only sell a pound at a time until I raised $30,000.
Nice.
Now, up to that moment, I had never sold drugs because I knew I was being watched and I was never get busted. I never sold drugs, and I had lots of offers, people saying, man, I can make you rich. Come on, join me. And I always turn them down. But when it came to keeping my family and I safe, I knew they were going to shoot me eventually. So to keep my family and I safe, I chose to sell marijuana to raise the money. I strapped $5,000 a piece on our kids. It was my wife and I, my autistic son, and my 2 daughters.
Nice. That's awesome.
Landed on the beach of Venezuela with armed guards around, wanting to turn the boat back. And if I went back, I didn't have nothing to go back to. We had sold everything secretly, our automobiles, our furniture. We told everybody we were taking a Christmas cruise. So all those armed police on that seashore were going to turn us back or put me in jail. but I had that bribe money to get us through. So I stayed in Venezuela for 8 months and then moved to Brazil, where they gave my family and I political asylum. I was the only, still to this day, we're the only Americans that have ever been granted asylum in Brazil.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah. So Brazil doesn't extradite either, just like Venezuela?
No, actually Brazil could have extradited, but there would have extradited for parental kidnapping. So we were still in danger, but I had things in place with my lawyer and some spies that would alert me at any moment the father decided to press charges, which we would have just disappeared into the jungle if that would have happened. But instead what happened is, through a lot of manipulation and good diplomatic work by my lawyer, we convinced the father to sign over complete rights to our son and to sign the piece of paper that would allow my son to get a passport. And he did all this. He did it all for selfish reasons. We paid him off to do it. He took cash to give away his son.
Wow.
He's a yeah, they're rotten people on this planet, let me tell you. So
seriously,
we got my son's passport. There was no danger of parental kidnapping any longer, which made us free to fly closer to home, which we chose Mexico. And I moved my family to Mexico, where I suffered surprise trauma. Stayed there 4 or 5 years. And now I'm in the Philippines. Now, through this whole time, from the day I left Venezuela, kept my expert witness consulting service active, and that's how I make a living now. That and a few other things. That's how I made a living, being chased all through those countries. And even now, people, if you go to my website, you know, I still consult in all 50 states defense teams to help people win their drug case. So I never stopped my activism. I just did it from abroad, because I learned that they can't put handcuffs, digital handcuffs on me, right?
Nice. Yeah, you already like fled the country like a badass.
Yeah, but now I'm going to tell you this. Now, I respect the U.S. government, and I am not taunting them, because I know they can't put digital handcuffs on me, but they can find me wherever I'm at and do any charges they want and extradite me. So the fear of that never goes away. I know they can do that. They shouldn't, because I'm not doing anything illegal. I promised the U.S. government in a unofficial capacity, in an unofficial manner, that I would never bust cops again. So they're leaving me alone, and they're letting me continue my activism in the U.S. from abroad. And I appreciate that, because that is
awesome.
Man, they kicked my ass. I lost that fight. The torture. I'll finish with this. That from the time I released those videos 12 years ago, and then shortly after that busted the cops, I didn't have not one fucking moment of peace until 2019, until I moved here to the Philippines. And I've experienced a year of peace. I'm sorry, I moved to the Philippines. I moved to the Philippines 2 years ago. The first year was not peaceful for me in the Philippines, but this last year, 2019, has been very peaceful. Able to focus now. My PTSD is under control, and I'm feeling really good, man.
That's awesome. So I think it's pretty well deserved too, after all the bullshit that you went through just defending liberty and trying to fight for people's freedoms. Like, it's just so crazy how the U.S. government is so oppressive over that. Is it illegal to bust cops like that?
According to the Texas Rangers, it is. But see, what I did is no different than what, after I did that false grow room operation, I started placing I'd get a lunch bag and I hid a GPS tracker in it, and I put a fake drug ledger, like $70, $50, $70, and what looked like drug money. I marked all the bills to make it look like drug money. And I would set these bags out and hide and film the police come by. I'd make the call. There's a suspicious bag at the car wash. The police would show up, look in the bag. Well, they read the drug ledger. They see the crack pipe I had in there. Well, they're supposed to take that money. They're supposed to take that money and turn it in as evidence at the police department. Well, they would take the bag, haul ass. They didn't know I had a GPS tracker on it. And I'd do an open records request the next day, and there wouldn't be any reports made of a bag turned in. So they stole the money. And I actually filmed one cop taking the money. This is on YouTube. He took the money and threw the bag in a dumpster.
Wow, what? That's crazy.
Well, they raided me for that. That county where I busted that cop stealing that money, that's the county that raided me. It's Williamson County.
Wow, you keep our officers accountable, and then we're going to illegally harass you. And that should be their status quo. I mean, how is that fair?
It's illegal. They filed charges on you, such as not having a private investigator's license, false report to a peace officer. They're all misdemeanors. So,
oh my God.
So, and none of the charges stuck. I pled guilty to some of them just to leave the U.S. on a package deal that my lawyer worked out. And I'm gonna tell you something, y'all. I do not recommend busting cops. And I mean that. Since then, I had a really lucrative offer. This is about 2 years ago. It's been recent. A very lucrative offer to come back to the U.S. and start busting cops for a reality show. And I said, I didn't say no. I said, fuck no. I do not recommend busting cops. I'm all about never get busted. I fully recommend good activism and this ply for freedom. I understand all of that, but I personally would never have those type of encounters with law enforcement anymore. It's too dangerous. Now I'm positive they'll just shoot you on sight for that kind of stuff.
Right. And honestly, you can probably do a lot more useful activism safely at your own home rather than getting yourself in unnecessary danger like that.
Well, man, you're right. And you'd be surprised the people that criticized me. I had other activists criticizing me, saying, you ran like a pussy. You took off. You need to come back to the U.S. and finish what you started. I'm like, yeah, and what? Go to prison like you did? I feel
right.
I feel like I can use my knowledge and the wisdom I've gained. I'm 50 years old now. I've been doing this drug game for 29 years, and I can use that knowledge, staying alive, to help more people than becoming a martyr. I do not want to be martyred. I want to be that old guy where I'm like 85 years old and I'm walking across the stage with a cane and giving one of my last speeches explaining that you don't have to go to jail or die to be a good activist. And I'm an example of that.
Yeah, we'll break the trend of all the previous activists who they either die or they're assassinated. That doesn't need to be a thing anymore.
Yeah, and they didn't get the message, and I did. you know, John F. Kennedy didn't get the message. Martin Luther King didn't get the message. These people didn't get the message. I'm not comparing myself to those fantastic activists, but I did read their biographies and watch their stories, and they got told over and over they better quit, and they didn't. I got told to quit, and I quit. So I'm still
Fair
alive.
enough. And you're still doing good stuff too. You just weren't doing the stuff that, honestly, the stuff you do now is probably more useful than the, you know, the small, low-level cop busting. I mean, that's still important, like, or it can be. But I mean, now I think it's much more practical for you to be helping people with their drug cases and helping spread the ideology of freedom.
Well, this is, yeah, and this is my passion. This is my art. It would be like telling a famous music artist to quit music. You know, I can't quit activism. I can't quit activism. It's my guitar. It's my piano. I can't stop, you know, my human rights intellectual sense that tells me this world is fucked up and we need to try to unfuck it. So I can't stop my own music. I just had to change forms, or I would have died or wound up in prison.
Yeah, and that's how life survives. It evolves and it adapts. So you took that single-handedly. So that's pretty awesome. So Barry, I want to ask you.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I've got some big things coming up. They're making a movie about my life. I've been receiving a check every month, and we don't have the deal signed yet. Now I've sold my life story rights. That deal's finished. So they're gonna make a movie out of that. I'm about to crank up a new show that I'll air on various channels. So now that I'm settled and have learned a lot, I've got a lot to teach, and I can't wait to get back on the circuit, and it's coming soon.
That is so exciting. This is kind of like a pre-launch for that then. That is awesome. So what's the show that you're about to be doing?
So it's going to be about harm reduction, but it's going to cover, you know, harm reduction and health through the use of psychedelics.
Oh, great. That's actually
I'm going to teach how to use every drug safely, including methamphetamine and cocaine. Now, I don't recommend anybody using those substances, but people are using them, and I've used them in the past, and I know how to use them safe. Nobody's talking about that. And I want to talk about the psychology of family units and marriages, and how to bio-program ourselves through the use of, you know, human growth hormone and testosterone, things of that nature. How to improve our quality of life.
That is awesome, and I agree with you. Harm reduction is important. Even if you don't agree with a substance use, people are going to use it. So would you rather them not know how to use it and try to use it, or know how to use it safely? You know, it's a pretty easy choice if you think about it that way.
Exactly.
So, Barry, from your journey leaving the United States and ending up where you are now, where did psychedelics come into the mix for you?
Well, psychedelics started early in my activism career. I had lived 35 years not doing any drugs. So
right.
I'd already achieved success as, you know, one of the top law enforcement agents. I done some things in life. I'd already, you know, I owned 2 car dealerships. I was a preacher for 6 years. So I had a limousine service. So I'd accomplished a lot. And then I don't remember what age it was, whatever 12 years ago is, I released that video, and I had been smoking pot before that. That's what really turned me on to everything. But to answer your question, I stayed on LSD for over a year. I mean, I did it 3-4 times a week for over a year. A lot of the interviews I did, I was on acid. I'm not going to tell you which ones they were, but the LSD, I found a really good source in Austin, Texas. This was so long ago, you know, I can't get in trouble for telling you these stories, but in East Texas, where I was living, Big Sandy, a town of 1,200 people. When I released that video, I was living in Big Sandy, and all they had floating around was meth and cocaine and, you know, weed. So I didn't have a good source of psychedelics until I got a good connect in Austin. That's when I started the MDMA, the LSD, any psychedelics I could get my hands on. And then when I went to Brazil, now I don't believe in a God, but there's something going on. The universe sets things up sometimes, or maybe there is a God, who knows? It's not my point, but my family and I had to flee. That 8 months I lived there, I was going to make my own shirt that said, "I survived Venezuela."
And you did.
I had a guide was going to take my family up the Amazon River, and we were going to live in a village of people that maybe had 200 people. 2 days before we left to Brazil, I got an email from a multi-million-dollar ayahuasca retreat center in Brazil asking if I could help them with some legal problems they had in Brazil, and in return, I could come do an ayahuasca ceremony. I said, you know what? I'm moving to Brazil in 2 days. And I struck a deal with them, and I moved from Venezuela into a multi-million-dollar ayahuasca retreat center for the rich and famous. I lived there almost a year, and that's where I learned ayahuasca. I tripped next to the president of HBO. I tripped ayahuasca next to Ewa Ewert. She's a famous TV personality in Europe. I tripped next to Vogue models and their photographers. That's where I cut my teeth on ayahuasca. Yeah. So I've been a fan of psychedelics since I started them in Big Sandy, Texas, because I had severe PTSD and didn't know it. And I'm convinced I would be dead now or crazy had I not had psychedelic therapy. Now, I can't do psychedelics here in the Philippines, and I'm okay with that. But when we travel out of the Philippines, say Cambodia or someplace like that, that's when I do my psychedelic tripping, and then I come back to the Philippines.
Nice. Actually, that's crazy that you tripped for the first time on ayahuasca in Brazil. That was the first place I ever tripped on ayahuasca as well. I was down in Brazil for a Santo Daime experience. They invited me down because I wanted to start my own ayahuasca church. And the idea for it was to start a sustainable eco-village of libertarians and anarchists who could live apart from the government, not be taxed as we're religious, and then we can have the ayahuasca. So that was a very interesting experience, and it really helped me out to take the ayahuasca and learn from it. So talk to us more about what happened after you learned about the healing effects of psychedelics for yourself. Where did you take it from there?
Well, you know, I had that wonderful training in Brazil, but I still never saw myself as a psychedelic therapist. I moved to Mexico, where my wife and I got a divorce. She became an alcoholic from all the pain and torture we went through in the U.S. because of our activism. You know, she had both of her sons taken away. People know about one son that was taken away. She had both of them taken away. So she, unfortunately, the alcohol got her, and this is before I knew about ibogaine. She had done some ayahuasca trips. She didn't really like the ayahuasca. That should have been an indicator to me that she was drinking too much. But anyway, we divorced. She, long story, she went back to the U.S. and became romantic with a close family friend, and he murdered her in Key West, drowned her. This was 2-3 years ago. So it's just horrible trauma, which forced me to move from Mazatlan, Mexico to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. And when I got to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, I was almost dead, Isaac. I was in horrible, horrible, horrible shape. I've got an article online somewhere that shows a picture of me when I arrived in Puerto Vallarta, and I was a mess. I wasn't sure I was going to live. But I recovered there. I decided to get off. And I know the question is, you know, this psychedelic therapy, what got me into that? So I'm getting to that. I decided to heal myself. I had to get off all the drugs and the drinking, including the PTSD medications, including Xanax, including all the cocaine I was doing, including all the drinking and partying I was going through traumas. And I realized I had to get completely clean and feel that pain instead of medicating the pain. So I didn't want to bury it, and 5 years later, you know, I get into another relationship with a woman, and boom, here it comes. You know, I had learned enough through psychedelic therapy and the ayahuasca retreat center that you got to feel that pain. So I did. I felt the pain. I went through that process. I became healed as much as possible. I met a new a Filipina in Mexico. That's why I'm in the Philippines now. I met her 4 years ago, still with her. But while her and I were in Mexico, she lived with me there 2 years. Her name's Mia Madrid. She's my wife. While we were there, we got invited to, there's an event they have every year in Mexico called Anarchapulco. It's an anarchist. Yeah. So I got invited to speak there, and I hadn't appeared in public at that time in over 5 years. So we flew to that conference. It was in Acapulco, Mexico. It's the only reason I went. I didn't want to leave Mexico. And it just happened to be in Mexico. So went there, had a fantastic time, came back. And unbeknownst to me, there was a lady in Puerto Vallarta who had an ibogaine clinic. She also was at the conference in Acapulco. She didn't approach me in Acapulco because I was so busy. I mean, my fan base showed up, and man, it was love. Oh, I got to hug all my fans and public speak again, which is one of my favorite things in the world to do. It's one of the things I miss. But she contacted me in Puerto Vallarta. She said, I have an ibogaine clinic. I want to teach you about ibogaine, and let's partner up in an ibogaine clinic. So that's when I started learning about ibogaine. I was dosed several times, helped her in her clinic. The partnership didn't work out. I chose to leave the partnership, and I started my own treatment center where I treated people with ibogaine and other psychedelics and ayahuasca. And I still do that now. In fact, 2 months ago, we flew to Mexico, Mia and I. She's a registered nurse, my wife is, so she has a medical background. And she studies and studies and studies these drugs. I think she's more of a drug expert than I am now. But we flew to Mexico 2 months ago and treated a father and a daughter for opiate addiction. It was really sad. The daughter had gotten into an accident at age 16, and they prescribed her oxycodone. And by the time she was 18, she was addicted to it, and the father had been stealing pills from her, and they became addicted together on the opiate. So we met them in Mexico and treated them with our holistic program and then the ibogaine therapy to free them from that. So I still go to Mexico. Sometimes I meet people in Thailand. I can't do the psychedelic therapy here yet, but we're working on that.
Right. So is it more controlled in the Philippines?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, I don't one, I can't do any activism in this country, and I like that. Activism from a foreigner is illegal here in the Philippines, and that sounds like something communist would do, but it's actually smart. The Philippines has a democracy similar to the U.S. However, you know, these heads of state, like the presidents and such, have realized that the U.S. government, the CIA, often plants activists inside countries to disrupt the country and to start marches and to cause problems. So in a smart strategic decision, the Philippine government made activism by any foreigner illegal here.
Well, that helps stop the U.S. government from messing with you.
Exactly. So if I were a government plant, which I'm not, there's no way I can disrupt the flow here in the Philippines. And I'm satisfied. I'm happy about that. It's nice. They say, this is a crude way to say it. Forgive me, but I'm just going to say it. They say it's not good to shit in your own backyard.
Oh, fair enough. That statement applies pretty universally, honestly.
Yeah, so it's nice that I can't do activism work here, no protest, anything like that. Now I can talk all I want online; they don't mind that. I can help all the people who are suffering through drug cases in the U.S. I can do that all I want. I can do my psychedelic therapy as long as I leave the country and do it. So I'm still getting to do the activism, just not here in the Philippines, which is nice. I think that's why I've been at peace this last year, because I'm not shitting in my own backyard.
Right. Well, it sounds like a pretty good setup, actually. So, so you treat addiction primarily at your clinic, right? Is that the main thing people come to you for?
Addiction and PTSD.
I see.
Yeah.
I remember hearing something about rehab. It has like a 15 to 20% success rate. It's pretty notoriously low. What's that compared to psychedelic treatment? Is it much more effective? Is it just about the same?
If handled properly, the success rate of psychedelic therapy could be as high as 90%.
That's like 4 times higher.
Yeah, if handled properly. Now,
Wow.
I'm just throwing a figure out there. I don't have any statistics to back it up, just from my experience. Because first, we've got to understand what addiction is. Drugs do not cause addiction. We have to get that out of our minds. We think people are addicted because of drugs. No, people are addicted because of drugs and trauma mixed together. The recipe for addiction is drugs or alcohol or any other substance and trauma. Like for me, I was recreationally partying on some of what they call the harder drugs when I was in Mexico. I was recreationally partying on methamphetamine. And traumas started hitting me. And I'm thinking I'm just going out to party. I'm going to smoke a little meth. By the way, I haven't given these details yet to anybody about my methamphetamine addiction. This is new. Y'all are hearing it for the first time. I've told a little bit about it, but not in this type of detail. So I was recreationally partying and then started going through all these traumas. And before I knew it, I was addicted to meth.
Okay, so what happened after that?
I became an addict. I realized I was an addict. This was over two years of methamphetamine use. The last year I was using it every day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So do you buy the once an addict, always an addict 12-step thing? I mean, I'm guessing from your experience.
No. Fuck no. Let me tell you, that's what I'm saying. We gotta know what addiction is. Addiction is drugs plus trauma equals addiction, because Addiction is not a choice. Taking the drug every day is a choice, but nobody says, I'm going to do this to become an addict. So
Right.
whether it's a 12-step program or a good psychedelic program or whatever, or just abstinence, when you stop the drug, whether you use ibogaine to stop the urges or a 12-step program or whatever, once you stop using the drug, that's when it's time to deal with the trauma that caused you to become addicted. Why are you medicating yourself by overdosing on this drug every day? And that's what made you become addicted. In fact, addiction is an overdose, basically, is what it is. You're overdosing on a certain drug or drugs. So, for instance, we give somebody ibogaine. That resets their brain. It does a physical, measurable reset to the brain, so they no longer have an urge for the heroin or methamphetamine or whatever. They no longer have the urge for that. But now we got to deal with the trauma. So if the trauma is dealt with properly, you remember me talking about you have to feel that pain instead of medicate it? So the person needs to go through feeling that pain, deal with that trauma. Once all that's in check, which could take, 1, 2, 3 years, 5 years, whatever, doesn't really take that long, then that person can go back drinking again. They can go back and use a drug. Now, I personally am not ever going to use methamphetamine again. That's a personal choice. But I'm convinced I could use methamphetamine right now and I would not become addicted. Why? Because I've spent the last several years dealing with my trauma. So now if I use methamphetamine, I am a person using methamphetamine, not a traumatized person using methamphetamine. And let me tell you something, methamphetamine is such a taboo. This is hard for me to talk about.
Right.
This isn't easy.
It's good that you are, though. It's helping other people.
I feel checked talking about it, but I feel like we need to. Isaac, 95% of the drug cases I work, and I keep a stack of 10 on my desk at all time. 10 cases my limit. 2 will drop off, I'll get 2 like that. So I keep 10. 95% of those are methamphetamine users who have become addicted to meth because they're using it as a medicine. It's called, in fact, the courts are starting to use the term medical meth.
Oh,
methamphetamine,
interesting.
The reason I froze. The reason I liked it so much is it's like Adderall. It is Adderall. It helped me focus. It made me calm, did not make me violent at all through my addiction. I never stole anything. I never fucked anybody over. I was a good person. Now, it drugged me down mentally and emotionally and physically. Man, that's a slippery slope. That's a dangerous drug if you're overdosing on it, and using it every day is an overdose. So I woke up one day, Isaac, it wasn't just like a moment, I realized it, but I just had this awakening that, man, Barry Cooper was one of the nation's top drug cops. Now he's become an activist in the war on drugs. Now he's a drug addict. So I had to learn. I had to learn to heal myself. It forced me into a lot of research. And so now I use that experience to heal others. I changed from a warrior. I changed from a warrior into a healer. I consider myself a healer now.
It's wonderful. Honestly, that is a great conversion too. And honestly, I think you're still both at once. So do you think ibogaine is more effective at treating addiction, or do you think ayahuasca is, or do you think it's complementary? Maybe it depends on the person. What are your thoughts on that?
Ibogaine for sure first. A person who's addicted needs to take ibogaine, wait 3 to 6 months, and then come back for the ayahuasca. for the ayahuasca therapy, because remember, there's drugs plus trauma that causes addiction. Well, years of drug use or sex, people get addicted to. See, I was addicted to the sex as much as I was the methamphetamine, because sex on methamphetamine and cocaine and those type of things, and even MDMA, is like way better than sober sex. Now, people don't talk about that, but majority of the addicts I treat have a sex addiction too. So,
So it kind of treats both.
yeah. So the ibogaine. Well, what happens after all the sex and all the drugs? Our brain physically, say our brain has these little neurons, and they look like little sea urchins under a microscope. Well, after years of partying and drug use and addictions and trauma and pain, those become unhealthy and they wilt and they start decaying. And the ibogaine, excuse me.
You're good.
Yeah, excuse me just a second. Remember what I was saying. Hey, Mia, LBC or somebody's calling and left a message that we've got a delivery or something. Excuse me.
Oh, you're good. You were talking about the ibogaine and how it works on the receptors, I think.
So addiction is not an illness. It is a temporary brain disorder. It's those little sea urchins in the brain, those neurons that are damaged. That's what addiction is. So when somebody's walking around as an addict, they have a brain disorder. That's why they don't think like you and I. I didn't think like you and I did when I was addicted. So they have a brain disorder. The ibogaine is the only substance known to man. Ibogaine is a plant grown in Africa. Calling me. Not many people have this phone number, and they're just blowing my phone up. So it's wrecking my train of thought. Yeah, so the ibogaine is the only substance known to man that that does a measurable reset of these sea urchins. They actually grow back to the pre-addictive state. It resets the serotonin levels, the dopamine levels. It just does a physical, measurable reset of the human brain and body to its pre-addictive state. In fact, I caution people. So, damn, I hate that.
Wait, you said you cautioned people and then you went out. So it's like, watch out for this, and then nothing.
Yeah, okay. Somebody keeps blowing my phone up and it's irritating me. So.
You're good.
Okay, thanks. So, what was the last thing I said?
You were talking about warning people about something about ibogaine.
Yes, after they take the ibogaine and it's been reset, I tell them, now it's time to work on your traumas. That's where the ayahuasca therapy comes in later. But you make sure if you go back to using the heroin that you're no longer addicted to. One treatment of ibogaine, addiction's gone and no withdrawals. I say if you go back to the U.S. and you start using heroin again, do not use the same dose you were using prior to coming to Mexico for the treatment, or you'll overdose and die, because everything's new again. Everything's reset. And if you dump that much heroin on top of it, it's an overdose and you'll die. I tell them, if you choose to go back to using heroin, you start with small, very small amounts and work your way back up. So the ibogaine does a measurable reset that ayahuasca doesn't do. Now, I've been reading some research lately, and ayahuasca does some resetting of some neurons and such. I think all psychedelics do, but it doesn't target the receptors that ibogaine does. So we've got to get the person unaddicted physically so they can concentrate working on their traumas. It's difficult to work on an individual trauma when you're addicted to a substance, because it's a big distraction to stay addicted. The urge is a big distraction. So once we get that distraction out of their life, then we work on the traumas. And one of the best ways to work on a trauma is ayahuasca.
That's probably why Ibogaine's illegal. They can't make any money off addiction if they're curing it.
My protocol, if I had it my way, it would be any addict, not any, but the majority, or any person that wants psychedelic therapy, whether you're an addict or not, I would start them out with MDMA. I would trip them MDMA at least 1 or 2 nights. I would let them rest 3 or 4 days. I would flood dose them with Ibogaine. I would wait 3 months and give them proper ayahuasca treatment. Proper is 3 to 5 ayahuasca sessions within a 7-day period. Just 1 dose of ayahuasca doesn't seem to really dig down deep enough and get what needs to be got.
Right.
So there is a protocol, just like healing from a broken bone, or, it takes 6 weeks to heal. So these psychedelics aren't just a 1 trip to the lip and we're done type deal. It's a process.
Right. That's how they do it with smoking cessation at Johns Hopkins. They give people psilocybin and then they potentially redose 6 months later to follow up. And it seems like that co-founded effect is what makes it go really deep and profoundly. Because one is just too confusing. You don't really know how to process it. It's like so much. You're like, what the heck? You get a little more used to it, you can probably learn how to take the information from it better.
Yeah, and that's what I did. They called me a drug expert because in courts, I'm certified drug expert in all 50 states, federal and state court. They called me a drug expert because of my past experience as a narcotics officer. But on top of that, I've used every drug extensively except heroin and opiates. I knew the danger of the physical addiction to those, but I've done copious amounts of every drug you can imagine. Like I said, the LSD I did for over a year. And you're right. When you've used these substances and overused them and have been on every level of whatever that drug can do to and for or against a person, you learn what's beneficial and what's not. Can you get out of control with psychedelics? Yes, but it's unlikely. Can you get out of control with methamphetamine and cocaine? Yes, and it's very likely. And heroin.
Yeah, right. Speaking of getting out of control,
we need to know the difference. I've switched people over from a cocaine habit to a psychedelic habit. I'm like, have you ever tried MDMA? And they go, no. I'm like, try this tab. Now get off that coke. And I teach them these psychedelics. You cannot overdose to death on any of these. By the way, you can take all the LSD you want. You won't overdose to death. You can take all the mushrooms you want. You won't overdose to death. You can take all the ibogaine you want. Well, ibogaine's a little different. I think somebody could take too much and possibly die from it, but nobody's ever died from ibogaine alone. It's always been ibogaine plus they're using heroin at the same time, or ibogaine plus an underlying physical issue that they shouldn't have been taking the ibogaine to begin with, like a bad heart or whatever. Point is, you can take all these psychedelics and not overdose to death. People don't die from MDMA or from taking too much MDMA. Hell, I've taken 10, 15 of those in a night. You don't die from that. You die from the dehydration. Because you won't stop dancing.
Right. And as long as you know what to do, you'll be good. That's funny you mentioned the psychedelics.
Harm reduction. And they've got it down in the U.S. in these raves where they're passing water out. if you see a friend that's been dancing for too long, you go tell your friend, hey, you've been dancing too long. Let's go drink some water so we live and we can dance another night. You know, just harm reduction is very simple information that saves lives.
So I have a question about your clinic. I wonder if anything similar to this has happened to you. Speaking about getting out of control on psychedelics, usually it doesn't happen. But when people take too much and they're not really expecting it, sometimes they can get a little rowdy. I heard this story about this guy at an ayahuasca ceremony, and he was freaking out after his dose, running into people and knocking them over. So they held the guy down, right? Well, the shaman comes over and he's like, do not hold him down. You are restricting his energy. So they let him go. 3 minutes later, the shaman is holding him down himself. He's like, come on, man, this guy's going nuts. Do you ever have to deal with anything like that? Or are people usually pretty restricted? I remember hearing you say something about reducing the level of tannins in your brew. So maybe that makes it easier to deal with.
Well, reducing the level of tannins in the brews stops the vomiting. People vomit with ayahuasca. The active ingredient in ayahuasca is DMT. That's what you're getting.
Right.
But yeah, I've had one incident where somebody became violent while I was treating them with psychedelics, and it was ayahuasca, and it happened to be a giant. He's a certified real giant. He's 7 feet 8 inches tall. I've got pictures of him, and I look like a midget next to him. I won't post pictures because, of course, I don't want to embarrass him. And most of the treatments I do are people who want their information private. I treat a lot of famous people, and you can cut my head off, and I won't tell who I treat, and that's part of what I bring to the table. Anyway, he got up from his. My clients lay down, and I only treat one at a time. In Brazil, we would treat 15 to 30 at a time. But I personally I do one-on-one therapy. He's laying down on his mat. He gets up. He's having fun and talking. And next thing I know, he just grabbed me by my throat and took off running with me. And I literally picked me up off the ground. I could have knocked him. I'm an old bar fighter. I could have knocked him out with one punch, but of course I wouldn't. And my partner at the time helped restrain him, and we just held him down until he calmed down. Well, here's what happened. This won't happen to me again. He had an anger bubble, and the shamans will even tell you that the ayahuasca will pop an anger bubble. That's what happened to the guy you saw that they held down. They don't know what they're doing. And they usually don't have a recollection of what they did. Now, the way to stop that bubble from that happening is to treat them with MDMA first. And I tried to tell this giant, I said, look, I want to treat you first with MDMA. I want you to trip tonight on MDMA. And then 2 days after that is when I want to do the ayahuasca. And he insisted, no, I came here for ayahuasca. That's what I want. So I talked to my partner, and my partner said, well, just give him what he wants. I'll never do that again. I knew he had an anger bubble, which the MDMA would have treated. I knew he had an anger bubble from my interview with him. When you're a giant, or say a big old guy like me, I'm heavily inked and tattooed, and I'm big. I'm 6'2", I weigh 100 kilos, so it's 220 pounds. Fairly muscular because I take testosterone and HGH, and I work out. And big, scary people like us have learned to be the nicest one in the crowd first. It's like if I walk into a room, or if this giant walks in the room, everybody thinks danger, danger. So he senses that, and he spent his life being the first one to smile in a crowd or say, hi, how are you doing? And never show anger. See, we never show anger. So he's buried years of anger, which made an anger bubble in him. If a giant walks,
so it was repressed.
Yeah. So you dump ayahuasca, you dump DMT on top of that, and
just like floods right out.
There's a sense of people with anger bubbles, but I always give them MDMA first, wait 2 days, and then start their ayahuasca. Because MDMA makes the person happy again. Most of the people I treat haven't felt happiness in ages. Because I'll ask them, part of the interview, on the questions I ask is, when was the last time you laughed? And they really think. They're like, well, I can't remember. I said, come on, you laugh? And they say, well, sometimes there'll be a joke on TV or something on Facebook and I'll giggle, but I don't laugh. And I said, well, when was the last time you were happy? And they said they can't remember. So that's a sign right there. We're dealing with a person that's depressed and hasn't. So give them MDMA and they're going to see what it feels like to be happy again and release and get that motion going forward. So they're in a good place for the ayahuasca. Remember, one of the rules when you're taking psychedelics is setting and the way you feel mentally and emotionally. If your dad just died, you don't need to be taking ayahuasca, right?
Yeah.
So the MDMA puts them in a happy frame, and it's the positive energies going forward. So when you dose them with the heavier psychedelic like the ibogaine or the ayahuasca, they have a much, much more pleasant experience. And I would love to see these shamans and such add MDMA to their program first. So I've done the research. There's no physical way a person can die if they take MDMA, wait 2 days, and then start ayahuasca. There's nothing physically can happen to them with that protocol.
Sounds safe to me, and fun too. Maybe fun is kind of undermining the depths of the experience. So these shamans that you mentioned,
you know what? Let's have fun. I agree that people say, well, these psychedelics are not to be used for partying. That's not true.
You can use them
for psychedelics. Both. Yeah, because it makes you happy.
Party
it makes
and
you
therapy.
Happy. And it does a therapy to you, no matter. And like back to like mixing these psychedelics. Like I explained, I like to have MDMA before ibogaine or ayahuasca. I also, when people come to me and they want to trip LSD for the first time, you know what I do? You know what I do? I give them LSD and a Valium together.
Interesting. So it kind of like levels them out a little bit?
Yeah, it takes the edge off. If you've never taken a Valium and acid at the same time, give it a try. Much more pleasant experience. Yeah.
Interesting. So I agree with that too. I think that partying can actually be therapeutic. In my last podcast interview, I interviewed Rick Strassman. He's a DMT researcher, and he said that DMT is it's not entheogenic because some people party with it. But I've been in a concert and had some of the most spiritual experiences of my life, and people might have thought I was just partying and having fun, and I was, but it wasn't like that's all it is. The more depth to even that experience. So I agree with you there. I think that's right. So the shamans, right, that you said you wish that they would have ecstasy added to their program to help with the DMT. I remember reading something about you saying that the shamans are unneeded for the transformative experience of DMT. So what do you think is needed, and what do you think is like too much extra, like too much woo?
Well, I think the shaman have good intentions, but they have no magical powers, and they're not a special spiritual human above anybody else. Because here's the test. Here's the test. If the jungle shaman have favor in the spirit world and can guide you through your healing better than somebody with no spiritual experience, then that means they've got magical powers. So heal us without the ayahuasca. It's the ayahuasca it's the DMT that's healing us, not right. The shaman doesn't have special magical powers. That's all bullshit. So shamans should teach that. And I got lucky because the shaman that I practiced under, that's what he taught me. And he's right. He said, these shamans think they're special, powerful people. We'll tell them to heal these people without the medicine. It's not the shaman, it's the medicine. So if it's the medicine, then you know you don't need a shaman to get that experience. And I've proven that, because I'm not a shaman, but I have knowledge of how to properly administer and provide a safe setting for a person to trip DMT all night in the form of ayahuasca on a couch in their living room.
Honestly, that sounds like, you know, you're basically doing the functions of the shaman without the cultural connotations that ayahuasca has gathered from its history. It seems like since ayahuasca is from the jungle and it's from these ceremonial practices, it's kind of like something that they haven't forgotten because it's a part of their culture, but it isn't something that's necessary for the experience to work.
That's right. It's not necessary. And further proof that all these diets, a lot of these shaman and ayahuasca centers have you go on and every one of them's got a different diet that you must go through. They tell you not to have sex before, or a week before, or a week after. These rules and regulations, and they shake banana leaves and blow smoke and chant and all. Okay, that's fine if you want to experience that culture. And I love experiencing that culture. It's cool to me. But that's not what heals us. It's
right.
It's
not needed, and it's not for everyone. Some people don't like that.
Exactly. Exactly.
Really.
And there was a really good point that I was going to make. The shaman. Damn.
Was it maybe along the lines of how it's like kind of maybe even somewhat harmful sometimes for the shaman to kind of give unnecessary restrictions that could hinder the experience? Because I know sometimes people have...
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I remember
I was just trying to help you think of your idea.
Yeah, you did. So here's the proof you don't need all those diets and all that stuff. I also joined a ceremony with Santa de Maia Church in Brazil where you did your ayahuasca. Those people come where I went, I walked into the church. Those people had just gotten off work or whatever they were doing for that day and came into the church, drank the ayahuasca, started worshiping. They didn't do a special diet before. They didn't have withhold from sex before and after. They live this life. They go to church on Sundays and do ayahuasca and have beautiful experiences. And they're beautiful people. I mean, a wonderful group of worshipers. So if the Santa de Maia, am I pronouncing that right? Santa de Maia?
Santo Daime.
Yeah, Santo Daime. I've been in so many foreign countries the last 8 years, I get it confused. Yeah, so if the Santa Daime, who have been using ayahuasca longer than any Europeans, any white people, you know, hundreds of years, thousands of years, I'm sure, if they don't have to have a special diet, neither do we. If they don't have to have a shaman,
absolutely.
neither do we. Now, if you want to take ayahuasca and go on a spiritual journey and talk to your God or what you think is your God, cool. Nothing wrong with being spiritual. But let's understand it's not the spirit, it's not the ghost and the goblins and the angels that are healing you. It's the DMT.
Right. There's no mother in the daime or in the ayahuasca. Like there's a lot of like mother references in the ayahuasca. And they didn't have me on a diet, and I drank it like 20 times while I was down there. I even saw a wedding. These people got married and chipped their ayahuasca cups and drank it, and 70 people who were also on ayahuasca started dancing. It was pretty amazing wedding. I hope that happens to me someday in the future. That would be awesome.
And that's what I want to see. I want to see the freedom of the ayahuasca where we use it safely, but there's no gatekeepers for it per se.
Right.
Yeah, we shouldn't have to go through a gatekeeper. All we need is a manual and a set to safely do ayahuasca. For me,
Right.
for
Terrence
me, for
McKenna said
me,
something like,
for me.
uh-huh.
No, go ahead. What did Terrence
Yeah,
say?
that's plenty. So Terrence McKenna said something about pretty much how ayahuasca is taking over the world because it's Mother Nature's defense system against a human race that has gotten a little bit out of hand. I think that's a really nice allegory. It's like, ah, shit, humans are getting crazy. We'll just spread all these psychedelics around. We'll help humans through their mind, through the plant. So I think that's a interesting allegory to use while you're using the medicine. If you want
Yeah, but
like
it's
a
silly. It's silly to me. It's silly to
well,
me.
it is. It's not. I don't think he's being literal. I think he's being symbolic. Like that's why we as Mother Earth are
Well, he
helping to
needs
spread ayahuasca.
he needs to state that because it's causing confusion. Now, I have a lot of respect for Terrence. He's done a lot of fantastic work, but he's not the god of psychedelics.
True.
And
Who is though?
it's silly. It's silly. I don't think there's a god of psychedelics. I haven't met him if there's one.
I think that's the right answer.
For me, now here's what I think, Isaac. People under DMT and ayahuasca, some will report that Jesus came to them during a ceremony. Some will report Buddha came to them. Some will report their grandmother, their dead grandmother came to them. I believe that the DMT triggers our higher self. There's two of us. Say I'm divided in half. This half's my higher self that's lived in eternity past, eternity future. It's ancient. It's been around. It got dumped into the Newberry. This is the Newberry. This is a wall between the Newberry and the ancient berry. The ancient berry's our higher self. Our higher self will speak to us in the form that will pay attention. For instance, if I'm a Christian, if Buddha comes talking to me, I'm probably not going to listen to Buddha. And my higher self knows that. My higher self knows that. So the ayahuasca my higher self will appear in the form of Jesus, somebody I listen to. So I think most of these spirits that people are meeting during ayahuasca treatments are just a projection. It's something their higher self is projecting so you can receive the instruction.
That makes sense because they know their audience, so they know how to actually spread the message. So I'm curious, keeping that, what you just described in mind, which is very interesting, can you relate that into how you said before that drugs work on a quantum level? Is that like analogous to like a software update, kind of? Like you're like downloading a new firmware like for your phone or something like that? I thought that was a cool allegory.
Well, I can't prove it, but I think literally psychedelics act as a debugger or decoder. Like McAfee has this antivirus software. Okay, according to science and quantum theories, at least what they've reported to me, if they're telling the truth, we are holograms. We're an avatar in one of the best virtual video games there is. We're not solid particles. You know, I was taught as a kid in school, you know, the model of an atom, and it had neutrons and protons and electrons. They told us those were solid particles. Then they came along and realized there's more space in between these neutrons and electrons than there is hard particle. Therefore, we're a hologram. We're more space than we are hard particles. Then we learn the protons and electrons and neutrons are not solid particles. They're frequencies, they're energy, they're waves. So we're not made up of a solid particle. So we're in a video game. Science has stripped humans down to its smallest form, and it's coding. It's ones and zeros. We have we're coded. We're an avatar. So these, just like in your computer, your motherboard of your computer, when you use it and it suffers a trauma, like it catches a virus, it rearranges ones and zeros or deletes ones and zeros or whatever, and then your screen gives bad output. So you know your computer's sick. It's the same with us. When we go through traumas and such, it damages our coding. It rearranges ones and zeros. It deletes and adds to where our motherboard, our screen in life is how we act. It starts producing bad behavior. Just like our computer screen,
Right.
when it's sick, we type an X, M-O, and it comes out T-Y-L. And we're like, shit, my computer's sick. So it's showing us that it has an infection. So the large majority of the population, especially in the U.S., they're walking around with their coding all fucked up from so much trauma that the U.S. gives people. So I believe the psychedelic is like a McAfee antivirus. And when you take it, it runs around your system, finds the damaged coding, rearranges it, replaces it, and fixes it. And it does it usually in a fun way.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Okay, so in that perspective, psychedelics are like breaks in the machine learning algorithm of our simulation that allow us to like repair the things that are broken in our system. Interesting. So that plays right back into what we were discussing before with the true self, how that can inherently be activated by the power of the psychedelic and help induce healing that's on a personal level. Because it's so powerful when you heal yourself, you know, rather than someone telling you that you're healed. You know, like
that's what I call it self shamanism. If the shaman healed you, or the pastor healed you, or your grandma healed you, or your wife healed you, or your husband healed you, you're not really healed. You need to get exactly what you said, Isaac, and that's the self-healing. Then you own it, and then you're really healed. There's nothing wrong with using your wife, using a pastor, using a shaman to help you with that, but they're not the ones who healed you. May I take a quick break? I've got to pee, man.
Yeah, go ahead, sure. Well, and when you get back, we'll go into the next topic.
Okay, be right back.
Sweet. Awesome. Wow, this is a great discussion, guys. So that actually covered perfectly the section on psychedelics. Asked him everything I wanted to. So that was great. I learned a lot about ibogaine. I did not know much about ibogaine, and I had no idea a reset addiction like that. That is crazy. No wonder it's banned in the United States. You can't make any money off of it. So we're going to start talking about anarchy and voluntarism. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the politics of liberty here and get Barry's unique perspective, considering he was he worked for the government. So, like, firsthand. Oh, I'm so excited. And if you guys have questions at the end, you can message Joseph Suzuka. It's in the comment section. He's the only Joseph Suzuka on my Facebook. Don't know any more of them. And he's going to beat the operator, and he's pretty excited. So someone call in, please, because I don't want to have hired him to not use him, so that'd be legit. But yeah, the personal life stuff was crazy. This guy's life is going to be a movie. I will be in theaters to watch it. That is going to be awesome. I wonder if there's a book. That would be cool. Man, that is just so nuts. My mind is blown right now. Holy crap. So yeah, we're going to ask about anarchism and cultivating a community that can be sustainable and off-grid. So a way that you can have your own agency in your own community without having to worry about interference unnecessarily in any way from any governing authority, because you are the governing authority. Self-sovereignty, or at least sovereignty for the community, and the community recognizes the individual sovereignty of everyone else, of course. So we're going to try to get that figured out. Then pro tips. So get ready. All right. There we go. Hey, buddy.
Okay, thank you for that, everybody. Thanks for giving me that break. It was well deserved.
Yes, it really was. Everyone is like so excited on this thread. They're so pumped. So let's switch the conversation from psychedelics, which that was very interesting, by the way. I learned a lot about ibogaine. I didn't know it had that powerful healing effect. And hearing about your perspective on some of the mechanisms of psychedelic therapy are very interesting. And I hope it encourages some people to look for that in the future. So I want to shift the discussion to voluntarism and anarchy. Are there voluntarists around you at all? Any libertarians, like-minded people in the Philippines?
No.
Really? So it's like just you?
Yes.
Wow. I don't know how you're managing it, but it's impressive. Where was like the biggest community you saw?
I'm sorry, what?
Where was the biggest network you saw of like-minded people living close together?
I'm not sure about that question. Well, let me just start out by saying this. Where I live, the people here are very submissive to the government. So they're statists, but they're much easier to live around than anarchists and voluntarists. The people here, although they're very obedient to the government, they're so kind. You got to understand, the Philippines, well known for their hospitality. They're known as some of the nicest people in the world. They're very polite, and that's why I thrive here. Because unlike the U.S., man, people just forgot manners. They just do not have manners anymore, and especially the anarchists. The anarchists are crazy AF, bro. Let me repeat that. They're crazy as fuck. The good thing about anarchy is anybody can join. The bad thing about anarchy is anybody can join.
Fair enough. No prerequisites.
Now, are the anarchist philosophies of the non-aggression principle correct? Absolutely. Their philosophies are bang on, and their philosophies live in my heart, and I believe those and I practice those. However, I do not identify myself as an anarchist or voluntarist, because now when you use that word, it's attached to that group of crazy people. Those people, especially the ANCAPs, the anarchists who are about this capitalism, and that's fine, but they just want to get, if you boil it down and if you break it down, it's a group of wealthy white people who want to get rid of the government so they can become rich. They really, most of them do not care about feeding humans. If you say something like all humans should have free food, they freak the fuck out. Because they go
this
nuts
is communist.
on that. Yeah, exactly. So
right, and it's like actually compassion.
Yeah, exactly. So their philosophies are right on, and I live by that. But I do not identify with that group. They're just too crazy right now. They're crazy.
Yeah, they're pretty volatile. So, do you think that you could have so the Native Americans, right? They have their own little thing going on away from the government. The Amish have that going on. Do you think anarchists could do something like that? Or people who want to be free from the oppression of government? Like, what if we wanted to start a community where, for example, the Free State Project, a bunch of people wanted to move to New Hampshire, I think it was, and they wanted to live in the town, overrun the town, and then start voting out all the laws.
Yeah,
so I thought something like that would be interesting.
There 2 years in a row. I was up there when Ron Paul was there. I spoke right after Ron Paul at that
Oh, nice.
gathering. Yeah. So, well, the answer is yes, but it's impossible if you force the whole world into anarchy. First of all, nobody should be forced into anarchy. That's a oxymoron, right? To use force.
Yeah, right. Forced into anything.
So the perfect world is what I call an autonomite world. And I got that word and that idea from a well-known activist, Leandrew Dixon, and my daughter, Kelsey Blue, or Kelsey Cooper. They're a couple, and they have been for years. They're the ones who managed my website for years, and they're in Mexico right now. They do a lot of work for other activists. Like, they do a lot of work for Jeff Berwick and some others on their website. So, but they're the ones who taught me about this autonomite world, and it looks like this, that the world is sectioned off, and one area of the world is communism, one area of the world is capitalism, one area of the world is anarchy, one area of the world is ruled by a king, and then we can opt in or opt out of whatever system we want to be in. Now, I would choose the anarchy portion, but there are people who would choose the communist portion. There are people that would choose the capitalistic geographical region. There are people who want to have a king. They really want to be statist. They want to be ruled. And they should be allowed to without us condemning them for it. You know, and I used to do it. I used to throw rocks at statists. I try not to anymore. I don't like the violence they use, right? So I can throw rocks at that. But if somebody wants to be a statist, they should be allowed to. And that's in line with anarchist philosophy. So the perfect world would be an autonomous world where we had these different sections, and you can opt in or opt out of whatever section you want. And yes, I do think the section of anarchy would work. I think it would be a lot of disarray at first, not violence. It's not going to be people running around killing each other like they show on TV, but just some disorganization, right? because of the you have to be just a little off tune to be an anarchist today. If you're an anarchist right now, just know you're a little off tune. I'm a little off tune from what the rest of the people think. We're all a little off tune, which has brought us together as anarchists. But as we're out of tune, it brought us together as anarchists. But because we're out of tune, it brings up so many other problems like infighting and egos and who's the top anarchist of the day on YouTube and shit like that. We'd have to go through a period of that before the anarchy would really work.
Right. It would have to like settle itself out. Actually, what you said, I agree with 100%. And a lot of people don't really. And I don't understand why, really. If you have a market of government, that's the most fair thing, you know, different forms like communism here, socialism here. If you force your ideology on the communist or the capitalist, then you're definitely not an anarchist. And second off, you're not allowing things to occur naturally and spontaneously to produce the most efficient result. So I agree with you. So you think it's do you think it's possible in the US today to like say I go up to the US government, hey, I want to start a psychedelic community. We don't want to get taxed. We want to start our psychedelic, you know, church thing here, and you can't fuck with us. Do you think they would do something similar to what they did to you for the cop?
Yeah, they won't allow that to happen right now. They will not allow that to happen. They do not want individual countries within their country. If you're within the borders of the United States, you're subject to their laws. And right now it's against the law to do those type of things. And I don't see the United States letting their slave population or a portion of their slave population free to build a community where they're allowed to do psychedelics and not pay taxes.
I mean, when you put it that way, fair enough. Maybe we'll have to see what we can do to convince them. I remember in Thailand, they started a seastead, which was like it was like a floating town, and they wanted to live on this
told
town.
them that wouldn't work. I told them that wouldn't work.
Yeah, Thailand said it was a threat to their national sovereignty, and then they tried to execute them, and they had to flee.
Yeah.
They weren't even in their waters.
Well, when they were doing CSED stuff, I told everybody that, okay, do it. I'm not discouraging it. That's great activism. But they're not going to allow it. These governments are not just going to allow communities to float around on the water and be their own country. The waters belong to them. They belong to the elite. They say there's international waters with no law. My ass. If they want to come get you, they're going to come get you. And they're not going to allow tens of thousands of people out on a floating island to live peacefully and not identify to the authority of a individual country. They're not going to allow that. And I was right, and they didn't allow it because only 2 people tried it. And
the one girl lived in Thailand. Now she can't see her family ever again. So, I mean, it's crazy stuff, honestly. So cool. So that was pretty much what I wanted to ask you, was how realistic you thought that was. Because like when I went to Brazil in the first place, that was like my vision. And then it was kind of similar to how you were describing, you wanted to be the attorney general and like you had this big vision. Then like the real world hits you and you're like, well, maybe this isn't quite so possible. That's kind of what happened to me too with that whole situation. But I still got my fingers crossed, you know.
Yeah, well, you've done a good job, and we can change the coding in this video game. However, it takes time and it takes a lot of people to change coding. We have our keyboard up here in our thoughts and our mouth. This is what we code with in this video game, and we can change coding. But what we have to remember is there's other people before us who coded these systems in, and it's very strong coding that's not going to go away just by one person thinking themselves through it. It's going to take time. It's going to take the right coding, which includes compassion and wisdom and love and things of that nature. And it's going to take a lot of people doing it at the same time to reprogram the coding in this video game, to unfuck this video game we're in.
Right. And I feel like it's like a shift in cultural consciousness that I think psychedelics are accelerating. And so, honestly, I think that's why this is such important work. So that pretty much covered the voluntary side of things I wanted to ask you. Let's move on to some pro tips from Never Get Busted. So this is one thing I wanted to ask you that I'm really curious about myself. And then I want to go through some of the other tips I've seen that you've mentioned before. But this one's it's an interesting one. So they have these Native American Indian cards, right? And you get it, and it says that you can legally use psychedelics that are natural because you're a part of this Native American church. My friend got one from the Oratory of Mystical Sacraments, the OMS, and it says, like, I can legally use psilocybin and cannabis, and if I get arrested, the cops are breaking the law and they could be open to indictment and public scrutiny, yada, yada, yada. He had a bunch of dabs on him, like a ½ ounce, right? And like he had syringes to put it into slicks, he had vape carts, he had everything. And so the cop's about to arrest him, takes his shit, sees this card, and he's like, well, I guess don't want to violate your religious freedom. Not only doesn't arrest him, gives him back his shit and gives him his dabs to leave.
What state was
this
that?
was Ohio.
Is medical marijuana legal in Ohio outside the reservation?
It wasn't at the time. It is now. So
Okay.
but I'm not as convinced it would work in court. It probably just scared that individual cop. And he was like, fuck, I don't want to fuck with this. See you later. You know, I don't want to lose my job or something like that because I don't really know the logistics of this thing. Do you know if those kind of things would work in court or maybe would make your defense stronger if you had something like that and you was religious?
Well, historically, the religious defense hasn't worked. It's worked in a couple of times, but that's a couple of times out of millions. That's why there's a lot of religious people locked up right now in prison, because the religious defense doesn't work. Should it work?
Shit.
Yes. Should it work? Yes. You have freedom of religion, and if part of your religion is taking a sacrament, a substance, you should get to do that. But if the religious defense was recognized and it actually did work, then why are people still going to jail in the U.S.? All we have to do is print up a card and say, this is my religion, don't arrest me. No, that shit does not work. You will get busted if you're out rolling dirty and get pulled over and get caught with it. And then you fight it out in court.
Shit. I have one in my car, I will admit. I mean, it was like $200, and I just kind of hoped, like, maybe I'll get lucky with some cop that is afraid of this. But you're right, that's probably your best chance. And that's probably slim alone. You know, it probably,
it doesn't
I feel
hurt.
like
It wouldn't hurt to try. It never hurts to try, but I've not seen it work. Now, it's nice you mentioned that, because Adam Kokesh is an activist in the U.S. He's running for president on the Libertarian Party. During his campaign, maybe a year ago or within a year, he was rolling through a Texas county in his RV. He got pulled over, and they seized some controlled substances from him, and they put him in jail. And I've actually read his filing, and it's the religious defense, and it's written beautifully, and it's written perfectly. And he's using the religious defense. He belongs to one of those churches in the U.S. He's a card-carrying member of one of those churches in the U.S. that supposedly makes it legal for him to use these substances when nobody else can. So we'll see how that plays out. It appears, I don't want to give anything away, but he may be onto something. I don't know. I personally don't see a Texas court allowing that to go through. I think they'll force him into an appeal, but who knows? You know, Adam doesn't have a family, so he'll sit in jail on purpose to prove a point. He doesn't have kids and a wife and all that, and I respect him for that. And he's nonviolent. He does not do anything violent toward the police. So I respect his work, and he's using that religious defense. But for me, is never get busted. Hell no, it won't work. The thing that works the best is to not get busted. Never carry more than you can eat. It's simple, y'all. If you got some acid or MDMA or weed, just carry enough, only what you can eat. And if the police start pulling you over, pop it in your mouth, drink the water before you ever come to a stop, and you won't get busted. And don't sell drugs from your house, or they'll raid you. Hide your drugs outside your house. If somebody orders drugs from you, meet them on a back road and pay it and do the exchange, but not from your house, because they'll raid you. So it's better to just not get busted instead of trying all these different theories. Now, if you do get busted, sure, try the religious defense, try whatever you can. I don't support a religious defense because I haven't seen it work. When clients come to me and they've been busted and they raise the religious defense, I tell them I won't take the case if that's the strategy they're going to use. I use the strategy of mounting a good defense, poking holes in the government's cases, manipulating their defense lawyer to do what we want to do, and put up a really good, solid, legitimate defense. And you'd be surprised how many drug people can go free if you just mount a proper defense.
Wow, it seems like that card might have been unnecessary. That's interesting, and I agree with you. I'd rather not get busted and not even have to whip the card out ever. I remember watching Never Get Busted Again, and I was 16, and like my parents are like eating dinner, and I'm like hiding the screen under my like desk, and I'm like watching how to avoid FLIR detectors and stuff like that flying over your house and stuff. So it was really badass. So, do you think any of those tips are like they're on to any of those tips? Maybe some are outdated or maybe they're, even better now. Anything like that, you think?
Well, yeah, there's better updated tips that I'll be releasing. And the tips I released 12 years ago still stand today, except the canine section. The
Ah,
Yeah, the canine section needs a re-edit, and I need to get that information out. For instance, now I used to teach to trick the canine, spray fox urine on your tires. It's not a good idea anymore because now any movement a dog exhibits during a search can be called an alert, and the courts are holding it up as legitimate. It can just be a dog walking around your car and he gives a headshot and shows interest on your tire. They call that an alert. Even though it's not, they call it an alert. So if you spray fox urine on your tire, the dog's going to headshot it and sniff it, and they're going to call that an alert.
ah, I see.
See, the difference between an untrained dog and a narcotics detector dog is one dog can communicate to the handler when he smells contraband. All dogs can smell marijuana. Only drug dogs can communicate to his handler at the other end of the leash, hey, I'm smelling marijuana. So all drug dogs will do a headshot and they're curious and want to sniff other things besides drugs. The difference is when they detect drugs, they either sit or they scratch. Scratch is called an aggressive alert. Sitting is called passive alert. And that's communicating to the handler that there's contraband. Well, that's how it's supposed to work, but that's not how it's working. There's not been one court that will recognize drug dogs false alert. I think the Department of Defense has handed down a secret mandate to all the judges in the U.S. and have instructed them never rule that a drug dog can false alert. And the reason I think that is because all these years I've been working drug dog cases, I quit testifying as an expert witness. I'm a consulting expert witness now. I was a testifying expert witness. And I testified in courtrooms explaining that this drug dog false alerted. The judge would always shoot my testimony down and not suppress the evidence. In fact, the defense lawyer would say, Mr. Cooper is a drug dog expert. Judge, if you will allow him to bring that dog into this courtroom, he can make that drug dog false alert. And I can make any drug dog false alert. I did it on my video 12 years ago, and I can do it in a courtroom, and judges won't allow it. The last case I testified in was in North Dakota. Fantastic representation, the defense lawyer. There's two Russians with 50 pounds of marijuana in the trunk of their car. Dog doesn't alert. The dog doesn't false alert. The dog just walks around the car. And the handler called an alert. So these Russians this is one of the best defense teams I've worked with. Two expert witnesses, me and a Harvard animal behavior science professor with an animal behavioral science resume to the roof. And he and I both testified in an evidence suppression hearing, showing the judge on the video, this dog never sat. He was a passive aggressive alerting canine. So to tell the handler that he's smelling an odor that's illegal, he's supposed to sit. And I said, Judge, this dog never sat, so it's not an alert. They brought the officer in to testify. the defense says, how is your dog trained to indicate to you that he's smelling contraband? So my dog is trained to sit. Okay, officer, did this dog sit and indicate that to you while you did the search of my client's car? And the answer, the cop said, I swear, in quotes, no, but he wanted to.
What?
He testified that no, his dog didn't sit, but he could tell that his dog wanted to sit. And you know, the judge ruled in their favor and did not suppress that evidence based on a canines alert.
What?
Yeah. So what we do?
Shit!
So what we do now? We got them off though. We jury trial and we won. They're free now. But
Nice, but still though.
What we do now is when I have a client that calls, says, Barry, this dog false alerted, and they show me the video that the dog false alerted. I said, yes, it is. They say, okay, we're going to win. I said, nope, you're not going to win on that. The judges know they're wrong, but they're ruling against it anyway. But what we do is we still get with their lawyer. The lawyer does all of this. I'm not a lawyer. I work with the lawyer. The lawyer will still bring up the false alert as an issue during the evidence suppression hearing, knowing he won't win that argument. But he adds 2 or 3 different arguments, like illegal stop, outside the scope of the search. So he has many arguments, including this canine argument that he argues in court. And if he shows that the dog false alerted, we know the judge won't rule that the dog false alerted, but it sometimes sways the judge over to go, you know, this dog false alerted, I'm going to give him points over here on these other 3 issues and get the evidence suppressed like that. But there's no such thing as getting evidence suppressed based on a false alert. So that's one of the tips on my video that I released 12 years ago that has changed on how to handle canines. And there's no way to handle canines now because they're just walking the dog around and saying the dog alerted. And there's nothing you can do about it. There ain't shit you can do about it.
Wow, that is very interesting. That's crazy, dude. Oh my gosh.
Well, and that's
he
why
wanted
that's why it's such a powerful tool for law enforcement, and judges don't want to kill that tool by, if they ever rule a dog false alerted, then that opens the can of worms up, and eventually dogs won't be used anymore. Police dogs should only be used to locate contraband, never used as probable cause to search. It's such a powerful tool. If a dog alerts, that's probable cause to search without a warrant. So it's a very powerful tool for law enforcement because there's no way to defend against it. We can't claim false alert anymore. If the handler says my dog alerted, the courts are saying it's an alert. It's a legit alert.
I wish we could set some kind of precedent to change that. I mean, let's hope in the future some judge didn't get the secret memo, and they decide.
Unfortunately, I started that. I'm the one who went around schools as a drug agent teaching other handlers, hey, by the way, if you walk your dog around a car and he doesn't alert, make him false alert. And I explain that. Make him false alert. That gives you probable cause to search. Because sometimes automobiles contain contraband that a canine can't detect.
Right.
So instead of letting the person go if my dog didn't alert, I just said my dog alerted and searched their car anyway and found their drugs. So I started that. I'm not proud of it, but there wasn't anybody doing it back when first of all, I was the only officer in the United States that trained his own dog. All the canine units back then, canine units had just started. There may have been 50 in the whole U.S., 50 drug dog teams in the whole U.S.
Wow. Well, you're paying your restitution now.
Yeah. I was the only one who trained my own dog. Other officers had handlers, dog trainers train the dog, and then they put the dog with the officer. So I owned my own dog. Whatever department I worked at, my dog went with me.
Oh, nice. That probably helped create a little bond there. One time I was about to be searched, and the cop said he was going to call the dogs. And I said, I don't have to legally wait for the dogs. I can leave right now. He was like, oh, well, I am a canine unit, actually. I've got a dog in the trunk, or in the back. I was like, fuck, dude. But it ended up being good. So thankfully, I started recording, and it ended up being fine. So can you still use cats to deactivate the drug dog?
No, again, a cat is going to cause the dog to do a headshot and some extra sniffing, and they're going to call it an alert.
I see. Okay.
There's no listen. There's no defense that I know of as never get busted, and I'm the king of this shit. I do not have any tips on how to beat a canine team. They're impossible to beat because of the way the courts have ruled since I released that whistleblowing video 12 years ago. Traffic stops.
So the most important thing is to not let the dogs come, right? So if they say they're going to go get the dogs and they're not holding you under arrest, you can legally leave, right? While they're waiting, while they're getting the dog.
Well, no, you can't legally leave, because they're going to tell you that you're not free to leave, even though you are. If you try to leave, okay, let's do it like this. I've been winning a lot of drug dog cases by not concentrating on a false alert, but concentrating on a court ruling called Rodriguez versus the U.S. Rodriguez versus U.S. says that an officer can only detain the person in a traffic stop for the time period it takes to deal with the traffic offense. That means either give a verbal warning or write a ticket. They cannot stop you for speeding, become suspicious, and make you wait 40 minutes for a drug dog to show up. That's an illegal stop. Cops are doing that. They're stopping people for a traffic violation, usually a bullshit traffic violation that they really didn't commit. And they become suspicious. And they say, you're going to have to wait. Can I search your car? The driver refuses consent. So the officer says, you're going to have to wait till a drug dog shows up. Well, that's illegal. That's 2 arrests. There's custodial arrests and there are non-custodial arrests. A custodial arrest is where they put handcuffs on you and put you in jail. A non-custodial arrest is any time a police officer stops your freedom to leave. So when a police officer pulls you over with the red and blues and has you detained for a traffic violation, you are under arrest. He's supposed to deal with that violation, so he has. He says, okay, you were speeding. I'm going to write you a warning ticket. Now that's done. At that moment, that motorist is free to leave. But that's when the officer will ask, can I search your car? The motorist will say no. The officer rearrests them and says, well, you're going to have to wait for a dog to show up. Well, Rodriguez versus U.S. says that's illegal because the person hasn't committed another violation for the cop to make a second arrest.
Ah, I see.
So anytime I get a drug dog case and they tell me it took 10 minutes for the canine unit to get there, there's no time limit. There's no time limit. The Supreme Court ruled that if the person is pulled over for a traffic violation and there's no probable cause, the canine sniff must occur during the process of writing issuing the ticket. So it's perfectly legal for a canine unit to pull you over for speeding, and while he's writing the ticket, walk the dog around the car. But it's not legal for him to hold you for a canine unit to come after he's had time enough to deal with you on the initial arrest, which is the traffic stop.
I see. So if that happens...
One more thing. So if the officer writes the ticket and you refuse consent and he says, okay, you're going to have to wait until a drug dog gets here, and you say, no, I'm not, I'm free to leave, I know the law, and you get in your car and you try to drive away, you're probably going to be arrested. And then you'll win in court under Rodriguez versus U.S. And cops know this. They say, what's the rhyme they used to say? You may beat the time, but you're not going to beat the ride. That means I know I'm putting you in jail and you're going to win in court, but you got to take the trip to jail. So never leave when an officer says you can't leave, or you're going to go to jail for evading.
Right. So try your best to avoid that then. Otherwise,
you just have to win it in court. So the answer is, yeah, you don't want a dog to show up, but you have no control over that. The answer is never carry more than you can eat.
Oh, yeah, you already covered this. Perfect. We don't have to worry about it now.
That's how you beat the canine. Never carry more than you can eat it.
So does that affect I guess that affects like the permeability stuff and like the whole car smelling like weed so they can't hit on anything? Because like if it's permeable or not permeable, they can fake the hit either way. If they want to fake it, they're going to fake it. So it kind of puts those other tips in more importance.
Well, I never advise to contaminate your car with the odor of marijuana. I advise to contaminate your house with the odor of marijuana. If you contaminate your car, if you purposely contaminate your car with the odor of marijuana, that's going to cause a drug dog to alert and you're going to be searched. But your house is different. The reason I said in my videos, take a bag of marijuana and rub it all over your house cabinets and throw your marijuana seeds out in the yard and contaminate it with marijuana dust everywhere. Because if you get raided, they bring a dog in to help find your well-hidden stash. And if your house if everything smells like marijuana, the dog comes in the house and alerts on everything. And it's almost impossible to find the stash. I've ran, I'm not proud of this. Y'all know I am fully apologetic for my crimes against humanity when I was a drug cop. So we're past that. And I'm not minimizing it. It's horrible. But I remember dozens of search warrants that I brought my dog in, usually weed search warrants, when we were searching a house for marijuana. Everything smelled like pot. There were seeds everywhere. My dog alerted everywhere. I just put my dog back in the car and hoped the officers and myself could find their well-hidden stash. So contaminate your home with the odor of marijuana, but not your car.
I see. I'm glad you pointed that out because I didn't get that one. Awesome. So that is very useful knowing that that's the current state of the drug dogs. Hopefully we can get something to change that soon. That's pretty messed up. So before we go on to the Q&A, let's talk about what you think about the future of psychedelics and liberty. Like with Denver, they just legalized psilocybin. What do you think is going to happen there? I'm really curious to see.
Well, I'm an optimist and I'm a realist. I see the world waking up and I see it getting crazier. It's almost, well, first of all, they like to make us think we're the minority. Like there's only small pockets of us freedom people. It's not true. They tell us that, oh, this little group over here is doing that, and this little group, and they don't give us the media we deserve, and they shadow ban our channels and all that kind of stuff, it's because we are a growing number and we are a big force. There's millions of us now that want freedom.
Right,
Millions.
they're concerned.
Yeah, there's a lot of us. So that's good. The fake legalization of marijuana and mushrooms and these things, that's a good step, but it's not legal. There were more marijuana arrests last year than there was the year before, and marijuana is legal in states. For every, like, they make recreational marijuana, there's 50 other laws they pass to make it illegal. Like, you have to get licenses and driving on marijuana and all this. So it's not legal. It's not legal. Marijuana is still not legal even in legal states. Now, we'll take what we can get and ask for more. I'm glad there's people who can buy it without going to jail and smoke it without going to jail and eat it without going to jail, but it's still not, marijuana is still not legal anywhere in the U.S. So I guess the picture I'm trying to paint to answer your question, I see two worlds almost joined. Like, let me do it like this. Here's the world. Pretend this is the earth. And this is the world of change and awakening and peace. And then there's another world that's right here, and it's the insane world, like what Donald Trump is doing and all this weird insanity stuff. And I see those merged like this. And hopefully what I believe, I can't prove it, is that depending on your choices, the two earths are going to split. And some people are going to live in this maddening, crazy shit. And some people are going to move on to another earth that's, I believe we won't detect this movement. We'll never notice it. To us, it'll look like they've changed the laws. They're allowing some voluntarism. They're quitting the war. They're stopping the wars. Everybody has something to eat. You and I are going to see it as, wow, the world changed. When I think it's just split like an atom. It's split this way. And then the people who still want others to go to jail for marijuana, prostitution, gambling, and they're still into that and still want wars and still want to bomb brown people and violate the non-aggression principle, their earth is going to split away. It's just going to look to them like more wars and more hunger and more shit.
Right. Honestly, that's a good perspective. I don't think that it will be like one way or the other either. I mean, it's going to be pretty nuts too. Once all these places start seeing the benefits of psychedelic legalization, hopefully it replicates Portugal. But, you know, you got to worry about some people who maybe take some mushrooms and maybe they go a little crazy or maybe they weren't ready for it. They can make it look bad for everyone. So I agree. You want to be optimistic, but you don't want to be unrealistic either. So people still need to make sure they're being careful.
Yeah, I'm not sure your example is quite accurate about we need to be careful about the person who takes mushrooms and does something bad.
Well, I think that's very rare and very unlikely.
Well, yeah, and it shouldn't. And even if it happens, that doesn't negate the fact that it shouldn't. That it doesn't negate the fact that it should be legal anyway. Yes, there's going to be some people. It's like alcohol. Okay, 98% of all violent crimes in the United States are committed by people under the influence of alcohol. But we still have alcohol that's legal. So if somebody takes mushrooms and trips and causes harm, okay, we'll put them in jail for causing that harm, but not the mushroom. And it's certainly not going to happen at the rate alcohol is happening. We have made alcohol legal to use. We've given people the freedom to do that, and it causes harm. So we should give people the freedom to use these other things that may or may not cause harm.
I agree completely. The unfortunate part is the media likes to sensationalize stories about psychedelics that are harmful, and it like ignores all of the ones that are beneficial. Like man on acid jumps off building. You know, you'll see that all around. Man on acid heals himself and becomes new man. I don't think that's going to be a CNN headline.
By the way, that's never happened. I did the research. There is no evidence that anybody has ever jumped from using LSD thinking they could fly.
Seriously.
Google it. Start Googling and digging. That lie was propagated when the CIA was experimenting. I think it was back in the 60s, maybe 70s. They were experimenting with LSD. They were actually going to use it in warfare. So they're experimenting with it. So the CIA would go to a party and secretly dose everybody with LSD and watch their behaviors. And one guy that they wanted to assassinate, they threw him off of a balcony and blamed it on the LSD. Said, well, he was on LSD and he thought he could fly. But there's never been one human being buried and their death certificate was from thinking they could fly because they were on LSD. LSD doesn't ever make you think you can fly. In fact, when you're on LSD, you're more careful. You won't walk up to the edge of a cliff. You're like, whoa, what's I ain't getting near that, bro. Now, could a crazy person take LSD and do something crazy? Yeah. If you give a crazy person psychedelics, you've got a crazy person on psychedelics. Just like if you give a crazy person a fifth of whiskey, you've got a drunk crazy person, and they need to be watched.
Yeah, I agree. It's the actions that happen under the influence of any drug that we punish people for that are considered crimes. You know, it's not the actual drug itself and its effects. And honestly, you should know your limit too, which is why you should start small. So you don't get to the point where you're doing that. It's kind of like driving on weed. People are usually more careful and they overcompensate for knowing they're impaired, which is why they usually drive safer than people who are sober and on their phones like, yeah, I'm good, I'm sober, I don't give a fuck. When you're high and you're like, oh, fuck, you know, I gotta fucking watch everything, you know, you're going to be a little bit more efficient. That's very interesting, though, that no one's ever said it from me.
And what you're talking about there is, it's called impairment. People should not be driving while they're impaired, but marijuana does not impair you. You can safely operate a motor vehicle while you're high. In fact, now, I wouldn't recommend getting high the first time and driving on marijuana, but there's studies after study that shows people high on marijuana drive safer than people who are not. When I was in the U.S., I would not drive unless I was stoned. I got stoned before I would drive. I drove better. I was less panicky. I drove safer. I was more careful. But now drinking, I don't care how good of a drinker you are, and I was a pro drinker, you cannot safely operate a motor vehicle while you're drunk because it impairs your mental and physical faculties. Marijuana doesn't.
Right, I agree completely. So I think that's part of the things that people are starting to see, especially when they make these false comparisons, like citing statistics that they're like saying, oh, look at all these accidents from cannabis, but it's like cannabis and alcohol. Like they just had cannabis, but they had other stuff too. Only cannabis, it's not a problem. So they're conflating their statistics.
Exactly. And not only that, but they are including motorists high on marijuana that the accident wasn't their fault. So you can be high on marijuana, a drunk person can smash into you, they draw your blood, it wasn't even your fault, and they'll say it's a marijuana related accident.
What the fuck?
Yeah, they're not, those statistics we see, they are not dividing the line between whose fault it is, who was on what, and whose fault it was, which is an important aspect if you're going to be accurate. If the person, if the person's sitting at a red light and somebody runs a red light and hits them, the person sitting at the red light, doesn't matter what he's on, it's not his fault.
Right. That's crazy. Yeah. That's crazy. So, all right. So, did you hear about, I'm sure you did, the, I don't know how to pronounce her name, Geiger? Amber Geiger. She is the police officer in Texas, I think, who she accidentally killed someone apparently that was in his own apartment. So she went into this guy's apartment, thought it was her apartment, apparently, thought this guy was an intruder. It was his room, his house, his apartment, and she killed him. Well, no one expected this chick to get off. Yeah, she got convicted. Do you think that police will change in response to seeing the public response, like more public responses to them being held accountable to their actions? Or do you think they won't really?
Well, I followed that. I followed that case very closely, and it was weird to me. If they're going to release a cop for shooting somebody, and if it was in fact an accident, she should not have been convicted. It's weird because the way it's portrayed, it was an accident. So let's just pretend like that's the truth. If that's the truth, she didn't deserve to be convicted. And while they're putting her in jail for an accident, other cops on video in uniform are shooting people unarmed, shooting them in the back multiple times and turning that officer free, letting that officer go free and not get indicted. And if they do get indicted, they get found not guilty. Or so they're releasing the wrong people. Now, I can relate to this. I can relate to this police officer. I came home as a rookie one time in Gladewater, Texas, when I was a police officer, and I was newly married, and I was knocking on the front door of my apartment, and no answer. So my new wife was asleep in the bedroom with the air conditioner going. She couldn't hear. I was tired. I'd worked a 12-hour shift. So I went out on the balcony and counted. I knew I was the third apartment over, so I counted 1 door, 2 doors, 3 doors, and knocked and knocked and knocked. And the door swings open, and it's another man. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing in my house? He said, yours is that way. We have 2 back doors. And I didn't realize it. So I did the same thing that woman did. I think she was reckless. I wasn't there. I haven't heard the testimony, but I think she was reckless. I think she was too fast to shoot. But if she really believed that that was an intruder, she had a right to shoot him, if she really believed that. And if they put her in jail for that, it's wrong. They need to put people in jail that are committing, these cops that are using excessive force and executing people, and it's not an accident.
You're right, because if we're making an example out of someone who's no one is ever probably going to do the same thing, and if they do, it's going to be very rare, that's not the best thing to make an example out of for the rest of the police population. You want to show that just being judge, jury, and executioner is the problem. And if you do that, then you will be convicted. I didn't think about it like that, honestly.
Exactly.
Do you think that will happen?
I don't. Right now, I don't. Right now, I do not see it slowing down. I usually get to see the first shooting incidents there are because of my fan base. By the way, thanks to all my fans. They keep me posted on every incident almost that happens in the U.S. And cops are still out executing people. They're out shooting people. Dude, when I was a cop, we didn't do that. We did a lot of crooked shit, but we weren't shooting people like that. I literally pulled my gun out on hundreds of people, and based on the standard of when I could use deadly force, I could have shot many people. By the way, the standard for that, the test for that, is if the officer, the use of force law is the same for police as it is for civilians. Any human that is in fear of serious bodily injury or death to themselves or another human can use deadly force to stop that from happening. So there were many times that I thought, oh shit, I may get shot here, but I didn't shoot the person. I'm like, hey, I guess I had a command presence that convinced them they better quit or they would get shot, because I would have shot them. But now today, cops have figured out that all they have to do is act like they fear for their life, and that's a license to kill. In fact, you hear them on the videos going, I fear for my life, I fear for my life, put the gun down, boom, 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 boom. That's their license to kill. All they have to do is articulate that they were in fear of their life, and it's considered a legal use of force, which of course is absolutely fucking ridiculous, because all they have to do is act like they're in fear of their life so they can shoot somebody.
Wow, that is disturbing, to say the least. So, okay, judging from everything that we've talked about, what do you think, and this will be the last question before we go to the Q&A. This is kind of like what I want to do to wrap up our discussion. What do you think the best way is to change the cultural perspective on both drug use and the police that will actually cause some kind of change? It's really tough, honestly. It's like
no, actually, I've got the answer. I've got the answer to this one. Police need to be like firemen. They need to stay in the office until a crime is committed, and then first of all, it has to be a crime where there's a victim. Firemen do not drive around looking for a fire. They sit there and wait until a fire is reported and they go put the fire out. Cops need to keep their asses. Cops need to keep their asses in the office. When there's a burglary or a robbery or a fraud, something that causes harm or a murder, they should get a phone call, and detectives should swarm the place to gather evidence to hopefully catch and convict the person who caused the harm. But this shit of them driving around being hall monitors and parents and watching every move of humans and putting them in jail for nonviolent crimes, it's like keeping the slave population under control. That's all ridiculous. We will never, ever have peace between the community and police until the police back off and do what police are supposed to do. They have way overstepped their scope of what protection and public service is about. So until that happens, there's not going to be peace between the community and police officers. But man, what a beautiful world it would be if we had cops that just sat in their office and you call them when you get burglarized, and people go, oh, but wait, no. We need the cops to drive around to catch the burglars and the robbers. Not fucking true. Less than 1% of violent crimes, burglaries, and robberies do police actually catch in the building or robbing the gun store clerk. People do commit crimes when police aren't around. So police don't catch the person in the act. Your neighbor can catch the person in act better than a police officer. Your community watching each other's backs can do a better job at that. We don't need the police driving around to protect us. We need the police there to investigate crimes against persons, gather the evidence, make the arrest, do the prosecution. Like a fireman. Everybody loves firemen.
So how do you think we could, like, how do you catalyze this change? You know what I mean? Like, how do we try to convince people, like, just make it kind of a platform and then activists support it and then try to make it like a message, do you think?
I think the only way I can see to get this to happen is just changing the ones and zeros in other people's minds and enough people's minds by spreading good ones and zeros. If enough people picture, if enough, and what I'm doing right now, I'm downloading ones and zeros information into your motherboard. Whoever's listening is being programmed right now with ones and zeros. So I'm programming. So if enough of us program and receive this programming, few generations down the line, hopefully the younger people will take action and build a world where they don't accept the police that they have, and they totally revamp what a cop is supposed to be.
Oh, it's such a dream come true, honestly. Even visualizing it is like, it's almost euphoric to me.
Well, you know what?
Let
me tell you this, bro. That shit y'all are suffering in the U.S. is only happening in the U.S. Cops don't act like that in Mexico. Cops don't act like that here in the Philippines. Now listen, bro, I have lived in the 3 countries where the drug war has reached its height of dark humanitarian crimes. The U.S., the drug war, we know what it's ripped up families. We know that. I was in Mexico. I lived there where the cartels are. Big drug war. Now I'm in the Philippines, where the president here went around and he admitted to doing extrajudicial killings. When he first became president 2-3 years ago, his death squads were driving around just shooting people. They did a buy bust. If they bought methamphetamine from you, they raided you and shot and killed everybody.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So I'm in the heart of, and have been in the heart of, where the drug war rages its hardest. And the drug war in the Philippines and Mexico is nothing like the drug war in the U.S. And I'll give an example. Did you know in Mexico they do not raid houses? Absolutely do not raid homes. The only time a home will get raided in Mexico is if it's a cartel person who went bad, and cartel will raid the cartel's house, or the federal government will raid a cartel member. But citizens who use drugs and buy drugs absolutely do not get raided. There are 50,000 raids per year, SWAT raids, in the United States on people's homes. Mexico, your home is your castle. You can do whatever the fuck you want in your own home. You buy the drugs, and as soon as you get home, you shut the door. You can party all you want, get the music as loud as you want, and do whatever the fuck you want in your own home. You will absolutely not be raided. I have literally seen these white people, a man and a woman, they lived across the street from me on a balcony, and they were alcoholics, and they got into fights on the balcony, throwing glasses at each other, beating each other up. The woman's just as aggressive as the man. Neighbors would call, the police would come down. Hey, are you going to open the gate and let me up? And they go, no. The cops say, okay, and they leave, because it's happening in their own home. Their home is the castle. So, and in Mexico, they're not driving around searching cars and arresting their citizens. The problem with the drug war in Mexico are cartels fighting the current government and cartels fighting cartels. It's a civil war. They're not driving around arresting their own citizens. The police here in the Philippines, although the current president is doing those extrajudicial killings, he's not anymore, but they're very strict on drugs here. If you get caught here with drugs, you go to jail and you stay a long time. But the police here are not pulling over cars and searching people, and they're not raiding homes. I've not seen one traffic stop in the Philippines. Now, the police will wave you down sometimes if you're not wearing your helmet or something, but they don't have cops, and Brazil's the same way. They don't have cops running around rounding up their population and masses and putting them in jail. That's only happening in the U.S. So that's proof that police do not need to be riding around the streets of the U.S. to protect its citizens. Here, there's no cops driving around protecting its citizens. The community protects itself. We all watch each other's backs. We don't need cops to protect us.
That would be so much better than the system we have now. Honestly, I really feel like it's something we can get sooner than later, but we can't be complacent with the way that things are. I don't think we should get violent about it. Personally, I don't believe in using violence to get freedom, at least for the most part. It doesn't really seem like you're much better than the person you're trying to oppose if you're stooping to their level. There's a popular voluntarist saying that says good ideas don't require force. So I think that, that is something that's possible to build here. And we could probably show, like you were saying, these examples of Brazil and in the Philippines where the cops aren't arresting everyone. We could show examples like, hey, it's working here, kind of like Portugal in the drug war. Portugal, if I'm correct, they don't really prosecute any low-level drug crimes, even for opiates. Right. And that works great there. So if we just hey, look over here, let's do that, I think that'd work a lot better. Thank you so much, Barry. That was a really awesome answer to that question, and it's really inspiring too. And I can see that optimist in you in that answer. But I think it's also still realistic as well. There's not necessarily a trade-off between those two. Thanks for coming on here and sharing all that, man. That was great.
My pleasure.
I feel freedom goosebumps coming on my skin. Liberty bubbles. Good. They're bubbling. And actually that's been happening for a second. So let's see. Do we have any Q&A questions? I have an operator now. Which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, while you got questions coming up, I need to take another bathroom break real quick. Is that okay?
Sure. Go ahead. I'll tell everyone how to call in.
Thank you. I'll be right back.
Sounds good. We already got a call. Go ahead and don't accept it yet because we're going to. Yeah, go ahead and accept it. Actually, might as well. Man, that was fast.
Hey, what's up?
We got one call in. Who's it by?
Mr. Jake McCauley.
Ah, awesome. You just have to, anyone else that wants to ask a question, just message Joseph Suzuka. He was the first comment in this thread. Only Joseph Suzuka on my Facebook. It's got like a purple profile picture. You can message, call in, or video chat, and we'll put you right on with Barry. And you can ask whatever you want. Except for right now, because he's using the bathroom. Oh, sweet. He is in the bathroom. You got your question ready, Jake?
Yeah, just about.
Lit. Sweet.
Should I turn him up onto the camera yet?
You can. Let's show everyone. There we go. See, this is high quality stuff right here. This operator costs $10 in Bitcoin a second.
Oh yeah.
Do you know how much those transaction fees are for me to pay for you guys? I got you though, no problem. One love. Actually, I pay an XMR. Why would I use Bitcoin? Come on.
$10 a second though? Oh yeah.
What? $10 a second is really worth it, honestly, because like I can't do this job myself. I'm busy doing the interview.
I feel like I gotta hurry up then. Wind up costing $1,000.
Yeah, it's gonna be pretty expensive. All right, cool. All right, Barry, we already have one call in. This is Jake McCalty.
Hello, Jake. How are you? I see you, man. Sorry. Yeah. Hello, Mr. Jake.
How you doing? I can't really see you though.
Oh. Here,
you take that over.
Can you see now?
Yes, now I can. How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Hey, hold the phone up a little bit so I can see him.
There you go.
Yeah, right there. All right. How you doing, sir?
Clear. All right. I've been really liking this, podcast. I don't know. Y'all have made a lot of great points. A few that have really resonated with me personally, such as, the addict being a traumatized user. The part about being drugs plus trauma myself that I'm not going to reuse it the next day, that I'm not going to allow myself to succumb to addiction again. And it worked. And it told me that I had successfully healed from the traumas that led me to addiction in the first place. So I'm just kind of corroborating that point you made. I thought that was very well said.
Wow, man, that's fantastic. What you're saying is you're proving my point that it's not the drugs that caused the addiction. It's drugs plus the trauma, and you got off the drugs, dealt with the trauma to test yourself. You tried heroin again and didn't become an addict again because you had dealt with those traumas and you were a smarter drug user after your addiction, which proves once an addict, always an addict is bullshit.
Is absolutely bullshit. That's right. And I did use the help of psychedelics to kind of walk me through my traumas. I did have a question, though. I'm just calling a comment. So, as a product of your own experiences in law enforcement, in all that you've dealt with the state, and your own exploration of yourself and the universe around you, perhaps through psychedelics, is there any message, any conclusions that you've drawn, especially on psychedelics, but is there any conclusions that you've drawn that you believe would resonate with and help current state thugs, current law enforcers, people that are doing the kind of stuff you are doing? If you could put something in their minds, something they might actually be receptive to, something maybe that the viewers of this program right now and myself, when we come across these people, we could share with them that you think might be of benefit.
Yes, there's a lot of instruction and advice and correction that I could easily and gently have a conversation with law enforcement about, but they won't usually hear it. They're not working with the same mind you and I are working with. The short answer would be, you asked what I would put in their mind, police officers' minds, to make the correction, or other statists or government's mind to make the correction. Yeah, here's what I'd put in their mind. I would give them a tab of acid and put them in a jail cell and let them work it out, and let them out 12 hours later, and they're not going to be so quick to throw other people in jail. That can be a funny answer, and it is funny, but it's true. Unfortunately, among the ranks of law enforcement, they hire people who have the propensity or the personality to where they just don't have compassion, and their minds aren't triggering. But if I did have a statement to law enforcement, I'd say it right now. Hey, American police, you do not have the moral high ground as you think when you're arresting nonviolent citizens and using excessive force. You are morally wrong. You're committing dark humanitarian crimes. You're putting people through unnecessary traumas. My suggestion to you would be to quit law enforcement and find another job.
I like that. I'm going to try to incorporate. I make a strong point of avoiding cops. You know, just when I smell bacon, I go the other way. Even if I'm not doing anything, you know, just because I know that there's seldom going to be a time where a police encounter is going to benefit my life.
That's smart.
And I've had them go very wrong. I've had cops. It wasn't even drug enforcement. I used to be very into drugs, both as a user and a dealer. I was a dealer for 8 years, started when I was 11. And I had gun crime enforcement. they beat the living shit out of me while I was in handcuffs. Like they tasered me, cuffed me while I'm on the ground. They kicked the living shit out of me. I mean, they were stomping my head into the ground, punching me, stomping my spine, kicking me for like 15 minutes on the ground. They were laughing while they were doing it. It was completely sadistic. It had to be illegal. Then they lied like shit on the police report. Yeah. They said they were punching and kicking them and stuff.
I'm very sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry that you suffered that trauma. I would, if it's cool with Isaac, I would like to keep this as a question and answer, because you know everybody in the U.S. now has a story where the cops beat them up. So we know cops are beating you up, and we're sorry about that. But I want to answer questions and not hear cop stories.
Shit, where'd you go, Jake? Hey, can you go back to that? There we go.
Yeah, hey, okay. Isaac, you might just, I prefer that we ask and answer questions and not turn this into a cop story thing, because that'll go on forever. That'll go on forever, and I hear them every day. I'm not desensitized to them. I feel sorry for every one of your listeners, but I know every one of your listeners, and my fans included, has a bad cop story.
Yeah, I sure have quite a few. All right, so any last questions, Jake? And we'll take the next caller.
No, that about does it. Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. All right, here's that.
All right,
for you, buddy.
Jake, peace and love, man.
Okay.
Peace and love.
Later, Jake.
Peace and love to Jake.
Yeah, he's awesome. So if anyone else wants to call in, you're free to. Jake's a really cool guy. I just saw a video of his. He posted about him speaking at Acapulco, which is where you spoke, right? In Mexico?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, same place. I hope one day I get to speak there. It's it's a dream of mine, actually. Go up there and, you know,
it's a
don't
nice
even know
event.
what I would talk about. I would probably talk about psychedelics.
It's a really nice event. Just remember, anarchists are generally crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why they're so fun, though, right?
Yeah.
That's why they're so exciting. What was your Acapulco topic?
It's on YouTube.
What'd you speak on?
Just I taught I taught a principle that Aristotle uses. I taught how to convince your crowd to believe what you believe. I taught.
Oh, I see.
I taught the subject of rhetoric, which is the art of persuasion, and Aristotle stated it takes 3 things to persuade your audience. And I taught what those 3 things were, so the activist could go out and the audience could go out and effectively use the art of persuasion or rhetoric And there's 3 ingredients that you have to use. I've used them here in this interview without you knowing it. Everywhere I go, anytime I talk about these subjects, I use the 3 ingredients that Aristotle used to convince my audience that I'm right. And you can catch that on YouTube. Just Google Barry Cooper and Acapulco.
Ah, dude, that is awesome. When did you do this again?
4 or 5 years ago. I lose track of time.
Reversing propaganda. Is that it?
Yeah.
Ah, dude, that's an awesome title.
Yeah.
And you're looking really slick in this video too.
It's a really good print. Yeah, that's back when I still had my dreadlocks. I had dreads, long dreads. I cut those since, but.
Oh, I know something I didn't ask you. Have you ever had any issues with people on SSRIs?
Yeah. In fact, I was on SSRI when I did ayahuasca, and we were told that you can't do ayahuasca and SSRI at the same time, or ibogaine and SSRI at the same time, because you could be affected by a serotonin overdose, and there's a word for that. I forgot what it's called. There's a medical term for too much serotonin, and it can be
syndrome.
fatal. Yeah, serotonin syndrome, exactly. But there's not one instance, not one case where somebody has died from ayahuasca or ibogaine while they were on SSRIs. It's doctors and people assuming that it could happen, but it just doesn't happen. In fact, the ayahuasca, the ayahuasca helped me kick SSRIs. I was on SSRI before I fled the U.S. I was diagnosed with severe PTSD and depression, and they put me on an SSRI. And thank God for SSRIs, because I tell you, through the raids and the jail I suffered and watching my family suffered, it was just unimaginable. I couldn't think clear, and I couldn't focus, and I was living in constant fear and torment, and I wasn't able to fight my cases like I needed to. I wasn't able to be the father and the husband that I needed to be, and the activist that I needed to be. And I realized I was having some problems, so I went to the doctor. My wife at the time took me to the doctor, and after he interviewed me and did my blood work, I thought I was just low on testosterone. This was 2 months before I left the U.S. The doctor said, "May I talk with you?" Talking to my wife in private. He wanted to talk to my wife in private. So they go outside, and then they come back in. And I'm like, this is weird, but what's going on? He says, "Well, Mr. Cooper, you're depressed. You have depression and severe PTSD." And I didn't know it. I just started crying. I wilted and just started bawling. And he put me on an SSRI. I stayed on that SSRI, which helped me focus, get through my cases, settle my mind down where I could be productive. I stayed on the SSRIs till I got to the ayahuasca retreat center. I tripped ayahuasca so much, there was one night in particular that I took the ayahuasca and I started kicking my legs as if I were going through like a heroin withdrawals or something. And I knew through being under the influence of the DMT that this ayahuasca was kicking the habit of SSRIs. And I didn't take an SSRI since then for a couple years. A couple years later, I had to get back on SSRIs.
I wouldn't either.
So SSRIs are a very useful tool when the mind and the psyche needs to calm down just to function enough to deal with some of these traumas. The problem with SSRIs is people stay on them too long. You know, I recommend if you're going to get on an SSRI, don't stay on it longer than 6 months or a year, but it's a really good tool to use.
Yeah, I think so too, honestly. I think we were talking about this on one of my Facebook posts, replacing SSRIs with microdoses of psychedelics. Do you think that's a good alternative?
There's one, now there's probably more, but most drugs release serotonin but do not produce serotonin. There's one that I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's called ashwagandha.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
I think it literally produces or inhibits serotonin growth. See, SSRI doesn't, you're not swallowing serotonin. An SSRI, when serotonin is used and leaks out of the brain naturally, an SSRI just kicks it back up into the receptors and keeps it from leaking out. SSRI doesn't produce serotonin. It just reuptakes. That's why it's called a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. It helps it just recycle. But I think ashwagandha, if I'm not mistaken, the research shows that it helps serotonin. And I take ashwagandha twice a day.
Nice.
And it's real. And I learned about ashwagandha from the bodybuilders. There's stress causes a hormone to be released in the human body called cortisol or cortisone. It's one of those. Well, cortisol and cortisone is a stress hormone that is directly tied to weight gain and fat, especially around the belly. So bodybuilders, to combat stress, to keep cortisol from being released, they take ashwagandha.
Wow. Oh, wow, that makes sense. So the ashwagandha is actually a blend in one of my dream herb teas. And so I make it at night, and it helps me fall asleep and have lucid dreams, which is pretty interesting. Well, it's in one of my dream herb blends, so it's not necessarily meant to make you fall asleep. It's meant to make you wake up in your sleep without waking up, so that you can control your dreams.
What
and
is
then
in
like
that?
do whatever you want.
Can you tell us what's in that? All the ingredients?
Sure. I actually have the ingredients right over here. Here's the main one. So it's mainly made with Callia zacatiki, which is from Mexico. It's a dream herb. And then we got some kava kava, mugwort, which is a very popular herb in America. And then we have Silene cabensis and Intana reedi, which is the African dream. And I mix them all together and we smoke them all. I smoke them all in a blend. Then I make a dab concentrate and call it dream dabs. Then I make a tea. So I smoke the concentrate, smoke the herb blend, and drink the tea. Dude, my dreams are like an acid trip every night. I'm going through different dimensions and then waking up for school. It's nuts.
Wow, man, that's quite a mixture you have there. That's what's wonderful about these substances is we can do that and see what happens. I'm glad it's working for you.
Yeah.
See, it's funny to me.
And
It's funny to me that you want to dream and I don't, because it's like I never get any rest. First of all, since I was a kid, at 5 years old, I was doing involuntary astral projections, out-of-body experiences in my sleep, and since then it's happened to me thousands and thousands of times, and it's tormentive. It's actually something I don't like. And I fall asleep a lot and start having dreams, and it's like I never got any rest. I fall asleep, I wake up in another world, I live it, then my eyes open up, and I'm in this world. So I don't want the dream herbs.
right. I will save them for myself, not a problem. Actually, I'm the first person to try this blend. I made it myself because I was like half expecting to die and half expecting to have these great dreams. Luckily, the second one happened. So sometimes you got to take a risk when it comes to adventuring the unknowns of consciousness. You know, just like any true psychonaut would do. So pretty exciting.
I think
not as good as the real thing.
Jake McCauley asked a question that he forgot to ask. He says, hey, another question I meant to ask but forgot to. I still haven't tried ibogaine. Should I use it to try to quit nicotine vaping, or is it a different kind of thing? Okay, well, my experience has been people who, Jake, that's a very good question. People who come to me are usually addicted to methamphetamine or an opiate or cocaine. And most of them smoke cigarettes. About half quit smoking, the other half continue smoking. Some people claim that ibogaine is a treatment for nicotine addiction. I haven't seen the evidence of that, except some people quit and some people don't, about 50-50. The best way to quit smoking cigarettes, I have the formula for it because I've quit 5 times in my life.
Nice.
And the more times you quit, people say, well, then you didn't really quit. Yes, I did. In fact, I got better at quitting. Once you learn how to quit, you get better at it.
Interesting. That's a unique perspective.
I quit smoking actually almost 2 months ago. I had been smoking. I started back up smoking cigarettes for 8 months, and I successfully quit about 2 months ago. and it's my 5th or
Nice.
6th time to quit. And here's how you do it. You get past the first 3 days. The first 3 days are when you have the biggest craving for cigarettes. And when you have a craving for the cigarette, understand that it won't last. Jake, Macaulay, if you want to quit cigarettes, tell yourself, like the first day I quit, God, I want a cigarette. And I go, okay, what is my level of needing a cigarette on a scale of 1 to 10? 1, I don't crave one. 10, I crave one really bad. And I monitor that. I'm like, oh shit, it's at a 10. I need a cigarette. But it won't stay at a 10 forever. And you can count 5 minutes. You can get a stopwatch and count 5 minutes. Put on, and within 5 minutes, your urge to have a cigarette will go from a 10 back down to a 1. Now, you may have that urge pop back up an hour later. So you're going to have that urge pop up many times, but understand that urge and that pressure you feel to smoke a cigarette never lasts longer than 5 minutes. After 3 days, the length of time between the urges will lessen big time. And after about a week, it'll really lessen, and just stay on that path until you quit. By the way, my battery is literally about to die. I probably got 5 more minutes, then I need to bounce.
Oh, perfect. I think we have one more caller. Tommy Summers wants to call in. He's just figuring out which Joseph to call. So just in case your phone dies, Barry.
We'll wait for him and take his last question. Yeah.
Cool. And just in case your phone dies or anything, Barry, thanks again for this interview. I really think it's going to help a lot of people because we covered everything that I'm interested in, just about. I don't even know what else I could discuss that I feel an internal passion for. You know, there are some things that other things that I like and other things that interest me, but this is what drives me. Like you said earlier, it's like you said it was your passion. You said it's what gets you going. I feel the same way too. So thank you for coming to, discuss how we can further trying to help people in our endeavors to support psychedelics and to support liberty. Because there's really nothing that I care more about than that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and it's beautiful we had to have this discussion. Honestly, we should do a follow-up later. That would be interesting.
Sure, I'm all for it.
Yeah, we could do it on your channel if you wanted to. Were you well, I'll ask you that later. But yeah, that would be really fun. I'm thinking that I'm going to internalize some of the tips that you've given into a little storybook. But just in case you have any intellectual property on them, don't worry, you'll get your cut.
No worries, man. I don't believe in intellectual property. I don't believe in copyrights and trademarks and all that. But hey, listen, so I think Tommy is not coming through, but he did comment the question. So let me answer Tommy's question and then we'll wrap this up, okay?
Oh, sounds good. Perfect.
Tommy asked, do you remember your dream or dreams, or if you controlled them? I have. The answer is yes. Of course, the dreams you don't remember, you don't know you had. So every dream that you have that you remember, that's a dream you remembered. Now, being able to control your own dream, that's called lucid dreaming. And yes, I lucid dream, which means I become aware. I look around, I go, oh shit, I'm in a dream, and then I'm able to control it. And that's usually what precedes my out-of-body experiences. And this is all sober. Oh. This is not anything drug-induced. But hey, Mr. Isaac, I've got to go. My partner and videographer showed up. We're working on a show, and they're about to put me in a green screen, and we're going to get busy so I can get some content out there and reconnect with all my fans.
Great. Well, I'm glad we got a good warm-up going for you, Barry, for you to do that. And I am going to go to sleep for a test I have tomorrow. But thanks again for coming on. Thanks for everything that you've discussed with us. And I hope we can have you again sometime soon so we can discuss some of the other things that we weren't able to talk on, which I'll have to dig deep for that because this was an awesome interview.
Sure, Isaac. It was my pleasure, man. And keep doing what you're doing. I don't do a lot of interviews. I still get a lot of requests for interviews. But like I said, I dig what you're doing. I support what you're doing. You got a fantastic attitude. You're a smart guy. I saw what your family went through because of the stances that were made. And it was my pleasure to be on your channel.
Thank you, Barry. I really appreciate you coming on, and so does everyone that got to watch. So good luck with that video you're making, and have a good night, buddy.
Okay, man. Peace, love, and never get busted.